This morning, the invocation will be Stan Bowling, the County Planning Director, and then County Administrator Joe Baird will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everybody please rise? Stan, welcome.
Thank you. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for the celebrations yesterday. Your words that came to mind yesterday are appropriate for today and tomorrow. And so we remember your word that says, "And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Love covers a multitude of sins." Lord God, we thank you for your word and for godly examples that have come before us and are among us now. We ask that you would empower us today by your Spirit to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stan. We're all wishing Commissioner Davis a happy birthday and would like to pass on our condolences for hitting 40, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
But Stan, could you turn the ammo off so we get the...
I'm sorry. Oh, this.
Hasn't changed. You're still the youngest guy on the board.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Additions, deletions to the agenda. Gentlemen, I have two items. The applicant has requested to pull item 10B3. That's 10B3 to be pulled. And then item 10B2, Councilmember Hetty wished to address the board. He has the city has a 10 o'clock meeting, so he has asked to be moved up on the agenda. He has committed to staying within our 3-minute time limit, and so I'd like to move Councilmember Hetty up to 5C.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Brings us to 5A, a proclamation. Presentation designating January 25th through 29th, 2010 as Go Line Community Coach Public Transit Employee Recognition Week. And Karen Deagle and Karen Wood will be accepting this. Welcome. I'd like to go ahead and present this now, and then also we'll be presenting it at the kickoff on the 25th. So, proclamation designating January 25 through 29, 2010 as the Go Line Community Coach Public Transit Employee Recognition Week. Whereas Indian River County is the designated recipient of state and federal public transportation grants and contributes local funding for the public transportation services for its citizens, and whereas public transportation provides benefits to all citizens in the community, including congestion relief, greenhouse gas emission reductions, economic development, safety, and mobility benefits. And whereas Indian River County utilizes the Senior Resource Association to provide service through its Go Line fixed route and Community Coach demand response systems. And whereas citizens from all walks of life in Indian River County rely on Go Line and Community Coach to access medical services, educational opportunities, employment, shopping, and other life-sustaining activities. And whereas Go Line and Community Coach employees operate 6 days a week in all weather, often transporting clients with sensitive medical conditions, and are asked to respond to any number of unanticipated conditions and emergencies with professionalism and respect for the client. And whereas Go Line and Community Coach are recognized as model small urban public transportation systems by the Florida Department of Transportation, the Center for Urban Transportation Research, and by peers throughout the state due to the safety, comfort, and cost efficiency of the system. And whereas the success of public transportation in Indian River County is directly attributable to the tireless efforts of its drivers, dispatchers, planners, operators, and supervisors. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, the week of January 25 through 29, 2010, be designated in Indian River County as a Public Transit Employee Recognition Week. Adopted this 19th day of January 2010, signed by all 5 county commissioners. And this recognition, I think, just goes without saying, the great service, particularly with the local economy decline. I know the GO line ridership has jumped tremendously, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. So this is well deserved.
Thank you.
Karen, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, first of all, good morning. My name is Karen Wood, and for the past 13 years, I've had the pleasure of directing the operation of Community Coach and GO Line. I'd like to express my gratitude at this time to all the county commissioners, to the county administrator, to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, and anybody else for your dedicated and ongoing support. On behalf of all the transportation employees and SRA, it's an honor to receive this award, and you can be sure that it'll be displayed proudly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make mention. Bus driver courtesy was given the highest score by clients in the 2008 Transit Development Plan. Also, the driver's ability to drive the bus was also one of the top 5 scores. Lack of public transportation was one of the top priorities and gaps, according to the 2006 Indian River County Comprehensive Needs Assessment. I'm extremely proud of all the drivers, and we have a few of our staff here today representing Community Coach, GO Line, our office manager for the dispatch. I'm extremely proud of all the drivers, dispatch officers, fleet managers, and office management. And under the remarkable leadership of Karen Wood, who is the transportation director, I know public transit will only get better. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just it may not be fair, but it is an indication of the quality of the program that we have here at the county, because whenever you can pretty much gauge that on the complaints you get. And it may not be fair, but it does happen. And I can honestly say I've yet to hear any complaints from the GO Line whatsoever. And so that's indicative of the program that y'all run. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Do you want to take this and I'll read it? Do you all want some pictures? Do you guys want to come back for a picture? Or? Okay, sure. You guys just want to stand in front and then...
What do you want?
Or you want to come up here? You want to come up here? Come on up here. All right, that's fine. Well, who's got the camera?
A minute there.
Yeah, bring them all up.
You have a camera or a sketch?
Yeah, come on up. We have a camera guy here. Oh, okay.
He's got one. He's got a big one.
Do you mind taking a shot for him? All right.
Look at that.
That's good government action.
You know, that's what I'm saying. Don't need a camera, we can handle that too.
Thanks.
All your efforts. Thank you for all your work. Thank you. All right, we're switching lenses here real quick.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice camera and everything. I'll tell you what.
You gotta squeeze down a little bit.
Yeah.
That's good. No, I think we're good.
Yeah.
This guy looks professional. Great, thank you. No problem. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 5B, a public announcement for Vero Beach Electronics recycling event on January 23rd, 2010. Himanshu, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Himanshu Mehta, Solid Waste Disposal District. Here with Elizabeth from Solid Waste and Christy from Keep Indian River Beautiful. And we're happy to announce to the board and the public of our upcoming Vero Beach electronic recycling event. It's taking place this Saturday from 9 to 3 in the Macy's parking lot at Indian River Mall. As you know, last year we had very successful events both in Vero Beach and Sebastian. We collected over 100,000 pounds of unwanted electronics, and we were able to keep these items out of the landfill. Again, we're excited to partner with AERC Recycling Solutions. They're out of Melbourne, Florida, and they'll be bringing their staff and equipment down to help us with the event. The mall has also reduced their fee this year compared to last year, and so we're very excited about this event. Briefly, I want Elizabeth to tell you about some of the prizes and things that we have.
We encourage our residents to come out for the event on Saturday so that we can give them a raffle ticket to sign up to win a refurbished laptop courtesy of AERC. We also have goodie bags that we'll be handing out by the volunteers that Keeping the River Beautiful will be providing. And in the goodie bags we'll have information on recycling, the Reuse Exchange Center, and of course goodies from our sponsors.
Great.
Keeping the River Beautiful is really excited to be participating in this again. We have over 20 volunteers who are going to help us direct traffic and possibly help us handle Garby as he walks around introducing everyone to SWID, and we're really excited, so thanks.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure to go out there last year and watch this operation in action, and it was amazing. If anybody's concerned that it's going to be a hassle or a pain, it is not. I mean, you pull up, they've got volunteers to help unload the stuff. They give you your goodie bag, you circle around, and you're out of there in what, maybe a minute or something.
Right.
It takes no time to do this, and they've got lots of volunteers, and it was amazing to watch just the mountains of equipment on those pallets stacking up, and it was what, 2 truckfuls or something last year?
About 2 tractor trailers.
2 tractor trailers full. So yeah, so it's a very convenient, very well run operation. Lots of volunteers. It doesn't take but a couple minutes of your time. Just go through the loop. They'll unload it for you. You don't even have to get out of your car. You just sit there, pop the trunk, they get it all out, and you're good to go. So it's a great event and very well run with a lot of help from everybody. Commissioner Davis, and then Commissioner Fletcher.
How much you? In letting the individuals know about this, have we contacted, what comes to my mind is like Best Buy, the Jetsons, you know, the people that actually sell a lot of these products, to be able to put up, because if I'm going to get rid of one, I'm probably purchasing one. And not that there's a big football game fixing to come up, but if I know where I can put my old one, it might be a good opportunity for us to capitalize on some of this at the appropriate time. I don't know if this is by accident or by design.
No, we usually do this one right after the holidays, so that if a lot of folks that have gotten new electronics, you know, over the holiday season, that some of their unwanted electronics, they could hopefully, you know, a lot of our residents are familiar with these events, so hopefully they've kept them in their garage and they'll come out for this event and drop them off. Again, this is strictly for residential, you know, customers and whatnot, so we haven't gone to a lot of those places. But what we could do is maybe get the word out, get them a flyer, so if they want to post a flyer at Best Buy or things like that to let their customers know that there's an event coming up, we're certainly happy to do that. We have a radio commercial that's going to start this week. Also, this flyer that you have has come out in the paper this morning. So again, we're trying to get the word out. Also, it's on the solid waste website as well.
No, and they typically don't take trade-ins.
Right. Right.
So, but to be able to, whenever I purchase, to be able to have somebody hand me a flyer that says, you know, get rid of your old one here, it would be a very captive audience, I would think, to be able to take advantage of it.
We can certainly start getting that information out, because one of the things that we did late last year is we also have started accepting unwanted electronics at all of our 5 convenience centers. So throughout the year, and as always at the landfills. So residents don't have to wait for these specific events to happen. They can drop them off there as well. So we'll get the word out. Commissioner Fletcher.
Commissioner Bryant, thank you. And one thing that comes to mind, you talked about the ease of the line and how quick it was. Due credit on all of the volunteers and Curb as well come up to the plate. But what I wanted to point out is I've worked the line for the past couple of events, and another thing that comes to mind is how the people have skidded the product or stockpiled the old computers, and that's something to be commended. There's neighbors helping neighbors to get their computers over to the recycling event, and we saw quite a bit of skids and trailers being brought in, and I think that was the lion's share of one of the trucks. Himanshu, any estimate? Do you have the tonnage on the last event, and you have an over and under on this event?
We're going to stick with the average of about 50,000 pounds. I think that's a good goal. Hopefully, we'll beat that.
We're striving for 50,000 pounds.
50,000 pounds.
Well, I'm sure to bring you at least one tower. I know I have it off onto the side and ready, and I hope a lot of others do too.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Himanshu. Look forward to hearing the results in a few weeks. Okay. That takes us to item 5C, which we moved up. This is item 10B2. Request to speak from Councilman Hetty regarding issues related to the Vero Beach Electric Utility. Welcome, Councilmember Hetty.
Well, thank you. I see two officers at the ready, so I'll make sure that I stick within my 3 minutes.
Sheriff, stand by, please.
Yes.
Start the clock.
Yeah. Recent events have been kind of driven by electric concerns, and the election in the city of Vero Beach clearly in which Mr. Wilson, who's in the audience here, and myself were both elected. We both had electric issues as part of our campaign. Glenn Herron and Dr. Faraday are also in the audience here today, and here's a couple of citizens that have gone out and given presentations to both boards and the public alike. The Stan Mayfield legislation that came before the city that tried to restrict the city was rejected by the city, but new Mayfield legislation by his widow is requesting that the city come under PSC control in Tallahassee. And the reason I'm coming to you today is I have a problem making a leap from legislative ideas to new regulatory requirements without a bridge of facts demonstrating the real public benefit. Ben Stevens, Charlie Hill, and his names mean anything to you? Now, how about Jim Gabbard, Tom White, Brian Hetty? You all know those names. And the reason I mention those first two is one of them is a commissioner in the Public Service Commission. The other is Deputy Executive Director. These are people you don't know. The local ones you do know, and I think that keeping things local is certainly very important. And I think before we lock ourselves into legal requirements to come under the authority of people we don't know, I think that we should first exhaust all efforts at reform with officials we do know. You know that you guys have a joint committee. Again, Glenn Herron and Dr. Faraday, they filed a complaint against the city, which I thought would result in a legal quagmire. However, it was stopped due to cooperation by those two gentlemen and the city manager, the city attorney, and the utilities director. We met and came to an agreement to hold off on spending a lot of taxpayer dollars, which would really be ratepayer dollars, because all of those expenses would be rolled over into electric rates. We and I want to assure you, this county commission and the county residents who fall within the city rate, that they do have someone on the city council that's willing to fight for accountability and the equalization of rates. And I hear out in the public, I hear that, well, we've got a couple of county commissioners that are getting ready to support a lawsuit so you can get out of that contract. Well, I would agree that there are questions about the contract. In fact, there's a meeting tonight where more of those questions on that contract with Orlando will come up. And certainly there's an invitation to anybody here or anybody that's listening to come on down to City Hall, be there, be part of the meeting. But I think that it's clear that we have enough people on the city council, and we've replaced the vacant seat with from Mr. Wilson by the former council member Ken Daig, who I think is in agreement that what we need to do in the city is provide safe, affordable, reliable electric service. And I just want to make sure that this county commission and the people that listen don't fan the fires of discontent, that we need to work with the city towards a better future and lower rates. And and again, invite anybody that's listening, come on down to city council meetings, help me help you. And if there's any doubt in anyone's mind whether or not I'm serious about pulling the city along to make sure that we do, I see Dr. Faraday and Glenn Herron, either one of those gentlemen could come up to the podium and either confirm or deny that I'm serious about my efforts in finding solutions sooner rather than later on the electric issues. And thanks for the time. Did I make my 3 minutes?
Just under. You're,
Just over, but,
okay. Commissioner Fleury?
Commissioner Wheeler's first.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I just say, Brian, I'd like to say thank you for coming over today. I'd also like to congratulate Ken. I see him in the audience. And I agree with you on most everything you've said. You know, government has a tendency, and politicians have a tendency to keep trying moving things further away from the people under the guise that they're going to fix it quicker. I can tell you that the upheaval about the electric system in the last year or so in this county would never have reached this level, I think, if it had been with the Public Services Commission, because it moves it out of town and to people, and then those people have to go where the meeting is in Tallahassee or wherever, and it doesn't happen. You have these well-financed special interest groups doing that, which in this case, if I want to be the devil's advocate, would be the city promoting their ideas. The public wouldn't be there. So I think government closer to the people works the best. And I think also this commission has been very willing. I haven't heard what you stated about a couple of commissioners wanting to sue the city. This is news to me. But the bottom line is I think this commission as a whole and unanimously have been supportive of working with the city and the residents, both inside, outside the city, and not only on electric, but water, sewer, and the other things that we've been discussing, hire a consultant for. And I think Commissioner Solari a week or so ago had a complete list that showed that there is dialogue and communication going on. But I still believe that government closer to the people works the best.
Absolutely. Thank you.
yeah, I have a few comments. One, I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank Mr. Horanz and Mr. Faraday. I believe that you would not be standing there before us as a council member from the city of Vero Beach if they hadn't worked so hard to articulate these issues and get these issues out in public. They've been gentlemen about this the whole way. They have given, I think, very good information about the different issues. They've worked tirelessly on behalf of the people, and I think everybody in this community owes them a vote of thanks. You did say, if I understood you right, Councilmember Heddy, that it's clear that we have enough people on the city council, but I'm not sure you said for what. I mean,
to make sure that the city cooperates. I think that as Commissioner Wheeler said, that we wouldn't be in this position if things had happened. I think that if the city had cooperated with Dr. Faraday and Mr. Herron, I don't think we'd be in the position that we were in. I think if the city were open to public discussion, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. And I think that with the new city council that we now have, I think you're going to see the city move towards cooperation.
I'd like to say that I don't think it's clear yet. I hope it's the case. I'll remind you that you're only one council member. I was only one council member years ago when I tried to get some of these issues more public, and it was near impossible. So I hope that you do have two other council members to help you. I'll just point out a couple of problems that you will face, and I hope you can overcome quickly. One is just getting the basic financial information out of your city. That you probably found already is a very difficult thing and will probably continue to be difficult. And I'll ask you if you now get the basic monthly financial information from the city.
Well, I think that you were very successful at getting financial information, and I think the minute you left City Council, the flow of information has stopped, and I think that you're going to see in the very near future that flow, that floodgate open back up.
And I hope it does. I mean,
it will.
I seem to recall just a few weeks ago, some of the City Council was surprised that they had a $3 million bill from their consultants and attorneys dealing with electric utilities. And I think that would have been apparent if that monthly financial information was given regularly. So I wish you the best of luck with that. And I certainly, myself, am more than willing to cooperate with the city fully, and will say that if we do cooperate and do the best thing, the beneficiaries will be the citizens of Indian River County, which I think is the goals of all of us here today.
Commissioner, I think that you'll agree that when you were on city council and they had a commissioner who was demanding financial information, that city staff, Steve Millay, was able to and did provide you that information. And I think that you have on the city council, again, members, plural, that are going to ask for and demand that kind of information on a very regular basis.
Well, actually, I was only able to get part of that information that I asked for. Big sections of it I was never able to get. So I think you've got a large job in front of you, and I wish you better success than I had.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Davis?
Yes, thank you. And I kind of agree with what Commissioner Solari said, Councilman Heddy. I heard a lot of I, me, my in what you were talking about there. And one thing I've learned a long time ago is politics is a team sport and full contact. And looking at it from what you have to bring forward, I'm going to simply approach it in the fashion of a trust but verify. I believe that the electric rates may come down, may come in line, and I do wish you well and hope that you can get it accomplished. But at the same time, as a commissioner, I will be looking over the city's shoulder. I wholeheartedly plan on doing so and hope that I don't have to get involved. But I am not going to continue to allow what has happened. And I think it's clear that this is a pattern of behavior that Commissioner Solari has taken an eye on and is clearly of the same mindset. And I'm not into suing cities or anything like that, but whenever you have so much of a transfer from the general fund or to the general fund out of a utility like this, I'm not going to sit by and just let it happen. And I do wish you well, and I will trust you, but I will verify what you do. Thank you.
Commissioner Fleischer, comment?
Well put, Commissioner Davis. I save some words. In addition, you said safety, affordable, and reliable. I believe you probably wanted to put affordable first, but you're a safety first kind of guy. I appreciate you putting on the gear and being part of the process to bring us into that affordable realm, no matter how insurmountable the odds may sound, and you are just one, as we are just one individually. But I appreciate everything you're doing and absorbing what Dr. Faraday and Mr. Rand has done, and hopefully we can get to that affordability being number one. But I truly appreciate it. And in addition, you said one thing about a couple of commissioners wanting to be anxious for suit. I am not one of those commissioners.
I'm just saying that the talk in the public is not productive.
And that I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's non-productive, and I believe that in that realm we would be entering into more of the political game as opposed to getting true value for the citizens. I'll be behind anything that you're doing that will support true value to the citizens. And at that point, good luck today.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for coming here.
And just, Councilmember Heddy, just my thoughts. One is, I want to thank you again for coming here and keeping the dialogue going. I think that's probably the most critical first step, is that we keep talking and keep this public and keep the discussions going. And also, Councilmember Daigle for him being here and listening as well. I do want to reiterate what has been said. The idea of a lawsuit or that the county getting involved legally with the city and OUC and stuff was brought up a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't hear any support on this board to go down that direction at all. So I think that's a rumor out there, but from what I saw of how this board responded, we clearly did not want to go down that path. And I also agree very much with Commissioner Davis. My plan A is that this all works out well, we come to a cooperative agreement, and we reach all the things we're striving for. But we do have a large contingent of county residents that we need to be accountable for. And so we need to be kind of thinking of a plan B in the event things don't work out. So as Commissioner Davis said, we do want to move forward, but we have other responsibilities we need to attend to as well.
What time is the meeting tonight?
6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Councilmember Heddy. All right, that takes us to, there's no minutes. Item 7, informational items. Any discussion on the informational items? Seeing none, we'll move to item 8, consent agenda. Is there any changes to consent?
Motion approved.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, seconded from Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Takes us to item 9A, constitutional officers. Darrell Lohr, Indian River County Sheriff. Resolution in support of Senate Bill 610 and House Bill 417. Memorandum dated January 12, 2010. And welcome, Sheriff Lohr.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. It is indeed a pleasure to be in front of you this morning. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the resolution that's in front of you. I'll ask Mr. Harpring to explain it in greater detail. However, please know that many county commissions throughout the state have adopted similar resolutions in support of these two bills.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. The resolution simply is a reflection of the board's articulation during the previous impasse hearing that was presented before the board of your desire not to be placed in a position where you have to resolve a collective bargaining impasse by the sheriff or any other constitutional officer. Currently, the House bill and the Senate bill both amend relevant provisions of Chapter 447 and simply articulate the long-standing historical belief that the legislative body, for purposes of resolving collective bargaining impasses, are the respective constitutional officers of a particular county.
Okay. Is there any questions of the sheriff?
Yes.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I've read through this and even talked to one of our lawyers, and I just want to be sure, and to me it's not completely clear. I think I know what the intent is, but the way this reads to me is they describe a legislative body as one that has the authority to appropriate funds. And they compare the school district, state legislature, county commission, city government, and then they get down and also with colleges and universities in Florida and the junior colleges, etc. And then for the purposes of 447.403, the sheriff, tax collector, and property clerk. But and in the resolution, it also mentions having the authority to appropriate funds, and that's my only concern with this bill, and I just want to understand it clearly that is not the intent of this resolution or this bill, and not only intent that it's not, but also that it can't be construed that way. And I'd like somebody, I don't know if Will's on top of this, somebody to clarify that for me.
Well, look, in the context of the legislation itself, the term appropriate funds is also tied with that particular body having the authority to designate the terms and conditions of employment. And in the context of the constitutional officers, the statement in terms of appropriating funds in terms of the constitutional officers essentially refers to the ability to spend the funds that are authorized by the commission. Because obviously, as independent constitutionals, here we are receiving our funds by virtue of the county commission acting. So there's no change in terms of the law generally. It simply has to do in the very narrow context of resolving a collective bargaining impasse, as opposed to changing any other standard of the law. And Mr. Collins, I'm sure, can comment on that, given the long-standing history of collective bargaining resolutions with constitutional officers.
I can appreciate Commissioner Wheeler's concern with the authority to appropriate funds, because that's something that the county commission does on an annual basis. The way this reads, the constitutional officer would have the authority to appropriate funds. I'm not sure that that's really the best choice of words. I think the commission appropriates funds, and it would be up to the constitutional officer to allocate those funds among their competing needs within their units.
Maybe call allocate rather than appropriate.
And I think there's a difference in semantics in terms of what's in the bill, because the language of appropriating funds is that language is not subject to being changed in either version of the prospective legislation. In other words, in the House bill and the Senate bill, if you'll note the copies that were provided, that particular subsection 10 under 447-203 is already enacted into law. Right. The relevant provisions of these particular bills simply indicate that for the purposes of 447-403, the respective constitutional officers are deemed to be the legislative bodies for their respective employees, and that goes directly to the resolution of an impasse as opposed to the issue of the funds, which the constitutionals don't have the authority to do so, and this legislation, as it stands, couldn't change it. It's on a completely different topic. Chapter 447 deals with public employees as opposed to funds. If you're inclined to want to change a word in the resolution, as it were, that's fine. I think the purpose of the resolution is to let the legislative delegations become aware, which I believe that they are aware that the county commission, not only here, but all county commissions throughout the state, do not want to be put in the position that this board was put in the context of resolving collective bargaining agreements with an independent constitutional officer.
No, I understand that, and as I read this, basically, legislative body means, their definition is, and I'll probably read it better than, it means the legislature, the Board of County Commissioners, District School Board, governing body, municipality, governing body of instrumentally or units of government having the authority to appropriate funds. And the next paragraph, and it does mention 447.403, and I just want to make sure that it's clear, because apparently they've taken the other entity, the universities and their employees and also trustees of community colleges, etc., and they're calling them the legislative body. But I don't know that it's clear that under this proposed law with 447.403 that this doesn't open the door for them to appropriate funds. And if Will agrees with that, you agree with that, I can support this. I just want to make sure that it's clear, and I did not understand it as well as I would have liked to when I read this, and I read it several times, and I just want to make sure we're not opening the door to change our form of government.
It wouldn't, because it's not, number one, it doesn't provide for that under Chapter 447. That particular chapter, as I noted, deals with public employees, and it would not, it could not provide the authority to change that. Secondly, in the context of statutory construction, given the location, and I want to get too technical in the context of statutory construction, but given the location of the amendment to this particular statute, 447-403, given the location of the statement that for the purposes of 447-403, the respective constitutional officers are considered their legislative bodies, the location and the separation of that from the location of the language in regarding to appropriating funds, it would not lead to the reading that you are concerned about.
Okay. One other question then, and I'm not sure, but I would think in order to do that the legislature couldn't do it. I'm assuming that it would have to be a constitutional amendment because they're constitutional officers, and this is part of the Constitution. And I obviously didn't have time to do the research on that from over the weekend to now, but I don't, either you or Will could comment on that.
Well, I'm looking at this, and it's on page 103 and 104 of your backup. And the first section on the definition of legislative body does say that that body has the authority to appropriate funds. Then the amendatory language says, for purposes of another section of the statute, that the constitutionals are deemed to be the legislative body for their respective employees. It seems to me that if a sentence or clause was added to the end of that that said they're deemed to be the legislative body for their respective employees for the purpose of 403, the impasse resolution, and added a clause but not have the authority to appropriate funds, then that would be expressly clarified and some of your concerns would go away.
Mr. Collins, that's in the context of the actual legislation, and if you'll note, 447-203, which is what you're looking at, the change, 447-203 is merely definitions in sub 10. And in regards to 447-203, the amendment refers to 447-403, which has to do with resolving collective bargaining impasses. It doesn't have anything to do with authorizing the change to prepare or to authorize appropriation of funds. Similarly, if that were to happen, in my opinion, it would not only have to be a constitutional amendment authorizing that, at least for the purpose of the sheriff, you'd also have to amend Chapter 30, which deals with the powers and duties of the obligations of the sheriff. This simply could not do that. And again, I'll note that's simply a definition, and it refers specifically to the independent constitutionals. It references 447, 403, which deals with the resolution of impasses. This section that it amends is simply a definitional section, and it refers back over to the resolution of impasses, which is under a completely separate section, which would not be amended. It couldn't happen.
It would conflict with a lot of constitutional and statutory provisions, but you can pass a lot of bad legislation by not thinking it through. We don't have 403 in front of us to put it in context. It might be worthwhile to bring it back in 2 weeks after I have a chance to look at it and have some conversation with you.
That's certainly at the board's pleasure. I can only say that the board would certainly, if you want to change the draft of the legislation in both the Senate and the House bill, then that would certainly be something that you could not do here. You would have to address with the legislative delegations. The legislative delegations and these bills, at least our legislative delegation is supporting this. Representative Mayfield has signed on as a co-sponsor for the House bill, and I'm aware of your concerns, but I can only say that because of the language and the rules of statutory construction, it doesn't amend or authorize the authority for an independent constitutional officer to raise funds. It couldn't do that in the context of identifying the independent constitutionals as the legislative body, because it specifically refers only for the purposes of 447, 403, which deals with the resolution of collective bargaining impasses. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I don't, in fact, I would think that was the intent of this, but as Will said too, if oftentimes once something becomes legislation, somebody else can find other intents, and it happens frequently. Could you live with this coming, and I don't know that the commission would support it, but bringing this back first meeting in March so we have an opportunity. I wanted to call FAC yesterday and
unless you wanted to wait for another 30 days.
I wanted to call FAC yesterday and get an opinion from them, and if anybody up there has been looking at this.
And they have. I can assure you that they have. I've been in contact with Florida Association of Counties, with their legislative liaisons, with their attorneys. They support the legislation wholeheartedly, both the Senate and the House bill, as do virtually every other Board of County Commission that I've become aware of that has passed this legislation, as has happened here most recently in St. Lucie County, I believe just a matter of weeks ago. And the resolutions are all very, very similar in their language. I think the concern that you have is more of a concern with the actual legislation that has been introduced, but it's been through the committees. Was in committee last week. And is being passed through, but we're certainly at your pleasure. I can only say that the resolution, at least in my opinion, reflects the board's desires.
Yeah, and that's all I'm saying is if we're going to send a resolution of support for the Senate and the House version, I'd like to understand the laws that we're supporting with the resolution more clearly than I do. And I didn't get time yesterday to talk to FAC, or I spent probably a half an hour discussing this with one of the attorneys in the county, and it was unclear, it wasn't crystal clear there either. So if you humor me, I'd like to make a motion we table this to the first week in February and have an opportunity to look at the legislation.
Motion from Commissioner Wheeler to table for 2 weeks and seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Commissioner Solari, discussion?
Yeah, just for discussion, I would guess that given the timing of this, one of the things the sheriff wanted to accomplish was to get this resolution for the legislative delegation meeting, which is coming up. And I tend to read it like Attorney Harping does, that this is limited to the purposes of 447.403, of which I have to admit I'm not that familiar, but I would be willing, for the most part, to take Mr. Harping's word that it deals only with employee relations. So I would think that, or hope that we might be able to do something today, subject to our attorney taking a look at Section 447.403 to see if there would actually be a problem. I think that while caution is often called for, we may be making a little bit of a tempest in a teapot with this one and derail the sheriff's attempt to actually accomplish what I think this whole commission wanted to accomplish when they were before us before. So those are my comments. We do have a motion on this.
Well, and I can tell you, my problem isn't what I think the intent is here. I just want to make sure it's clear, and I would like to know what FAC sees in this. There are legislative branch, that work with the state representatives and senators, and that's my only interest.
Mr. Chairman.
I would then like to see if this commission can then give some verbiage in support of the idea, so that at the delegation meeting we can say that, well, we basically support the concept of limited to employee relations. The sheriff or the constitutional officers ought to be the legislative body, and that it is something that clearly has nothing to do with appropriations, so that we can at least as a board say that we're comfortable with that, and that we basically do not want to be the legislative body vis-a-vis the sheriff's internal employee relations.
Commissioner Solar, you're correct on your observations in terms of timing and importance, primarily because of where we are in the committee weeks right now. Similarly, I can only represent you that I have not heard articulated either last year when these bills were presented or this year any concern that it would augment or change the powers and duties of the office of the sheriff or the other constitutional officers.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
I would like to go ahead and add the language that Mr. Collins was talking about to address Commissioner Wheeler's concerns. I think we have time to do that before this meeting is over. And let's go ahead and, I mean, if somebody agrees philosophically with the intent of this, after that language, I believe go ahead and have the vote on that. But I'm ready to move forward. This was a situation that I don't think that this commission belonged, and committed to trying to change that process.
Well, it's a lot bigger than that, though. I mean, this is going to be new state law if it passes through the Senate and the House, which I assume it would. But it's not just about this commission; it's about state law.
Commissioner Fletcher.
And I agree. I don't think this is a matter of avoidance. We were placed in an uncomfortable situation. We had to do our job, and our job we did. I believe that we're one of the three options available for impasse, and that's another one of my concerns. I share not only the previous concerns, but also concern that we are one of the three options to impasse, and I don't know if we should be bargaining or appealing for Senate Bill 610 or House Bill 417. Most certainly, if and when they do pass, we will be here to abide by them to the fullest extent. But at this point, I don't know if we should be moving forward in this dialogue without a thorough review by our counsel.
And the other thing I might add, too, just for some clarification, I know that the Sheriff's Association has a very strong lobby, and they're going to be working this in Tallahassee at the appropriate time. And I can see an importance of being in front of the legislative delegation, but the real work's going to take place in Tallahassee. I know when I was sheriff, we'd go for a week at a time and walk the hallways, and I'm sure Sheriff Lohr is going to be doing the same thing. So this isn't a delay tactic or anything else. I just feel more comfortable, and I really pretty much agree with you, Jim, and I think that's the intent, but I'd be more comfortable to take a hard look at this. And that's therefore the motion.
Commissioner Wheeler, would you be willing to amend your motion, again, table it for 2 weeks to bring back, but also to authorize the chairman to approach our legislative delegation, tell them that we support designating constitutional officers as a legislative body for purposes of collective bargaining?
Mr. Chair, can we have that in 2 separate motions?
We could do that if you'd like as well. Okay. All right. So we have a motion to table this for 2 weeks. In a second, any further discussion? Anyone from the public wishes to comment? Yes, sir.
Joe Paola from Coastal Florida PBA. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think it would be good if you do give us some time to look over and review it. We were notified last night to come down here and see what it is. I'm heading down to St. Lucie County for a vote down there, and I know PERC has up in Tallahassee, and they're waiting for Pasco County with the legislature to go over their viewing on the decision. So we would appreciate if you do give some time to look over, so we have time to look over it also.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, I can only note that the delegation meeting itself is next Friday, and after that they will be at, they will be up in Tallahassee. getting ready for the legislative session and committee weeks. And I, again, agree with Commissioner Solari that on some levels, I think with all due respect, it's much ado about very little, given that the resolution simply reflects the statements of each and every one of you commissioners in regards to your desires not to be involved in collective bargaining impasses.
And Mr. Harvey, I think, if the board doesn't give me permission to pass it along as chairman, I will certainly pass along individually, letting the legislative delegation know that we support the concept here. But I do agree with Commissioner Wheeler. I think just, it doesn't hurt to take another extra couple of weeks to make sure everything is done appropriately. But certainly, I do support the idea of the constitutional officers being the legislative body for the collective bargaining agreement. So,
Mr. Chairman, too, I think probably by next Friday I can have answers to everything here.
We don't have another meeting.
No, I'm not talking about our having a meeting. I'm just talking about whether you represent it as chairman or whether you represent it as an individual. And I don't have objections to the intent here. But I think with Will's help and perhaps talking to FAC, I can find out between now and next Friday. So, if there is a difference of opinion, I can rebuttal you in front of the legislative delegation. But I would like a chance to look at this before we.
Okay. All right.
Please don't hesitate to contact me, gentlemen, as I have all the background information and material on 447, 403. I have an excellent dialogue with your county attorney in his office. So if there's anything I can do to be of assistance in providing with information, just let me know.
Jim, maybe I could meet with, I don't know what your schedules are, but perhaps maybe sometime tomorrow, midday or mid-morning or sometime, I'd meet with you and Will, and we even call FAC.
I'll be happy to make myself available.
I'll get in touch with you this afternoon.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to table this to the February 2nd meeting. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Solari and Davis
Mr. Chairman?
opposed. Commissioner Solari.
I'd like to make a motion that incorporates your language. If you could read that language again.
Basically, that the Board of County Commissioners supports designating the constitutional officers as a legislative body for the purposes of collective bargaining.
With the understanding that this in no way impacts appropriations.
Correct.
And with that, I'd like to make that motion that this board go ahead and authorize you to have that discussion with the legislature.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a discussion, or a motion by Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Davis. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Sheriff, and we do support your intent here, and we'll be glad to pass that on to our legislative body.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That takes us to item 10A, public hearings. There are none. Then we go to items 10B1, public discussion items. Request to speak from Frank Zork regarding communications between county and Piper, unavailability of communications, appearance of sunshine law violation. Mr. Zork in the audience? I do not see him. We will reserve time for Mr. Zork if he does show up subsequent. We've taken care of item 10B2. And item 10B3 was pulled at the applicant's request. That takes us to item 12A, community development. Approval of contract award for the rehabilitation of 8 homes approved on the Hurricane Wilma Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Initiative. Memorandum dated January 8th, 2010. Welcome, Bob.
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating, County Community Development Director. This is a proposed contract award for the 4th group of Hurricane Wilma recipients. This would normally be under the consent agenda, but we need to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. So staff recommends approval, but would encourage you to identify whether or not you have any conflicts.
We could then start down here with Commissioner Flesher. If you'd like to state if you have any conflicts.
No known conflicts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis?
I have no known conflicts.
I have no known conflicts.
No known conflicts, Mr. Chairman.
Ditto.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen?
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded from Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Bob. Takes us to item 12D, Human Resources. Item 1, approval of county attorney employment contract memorandum dated January 11th, 2010. And Will or Jim, is anybody going to present this?
I think Jim was.
Okay. We will,
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, the contract that's up here, and in fact, I'll make a motion to approve this contract.
Second for discussion.
It's extremely simplistic, and as long as he's not here to promote it, Mr. Polakowicz is coming with a $150,000 annual salary, with a car allowance, with a termination within 30 days, with severance of 30 days if he's terminated without cause, and also no notice requirement and no severance pay if he is terminated without cause. And this is a very simplistic contract, and I think it's in line with what a lot of other employees would have with accumulated benefits, etc. And I also think that we've really, in my opinion, and time will tell, but I think we've really had a find, if you will, with Mr. Polakowicz. So with that, I'll make the motion to accept his contract.
Okay, we do have a motion and seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And, you know, it's ironic that this motion is being made and seconded by two of the commissioners who most certainly have not been supportive of contracts. And with that said, I don't even know if this is qualifying as a contract as far as the way the bar was set in years past. And I think this is probably the first of any to come, not many to come, but any to come. I commented with Mr. Polakowicz on the interview about contracts, and he had said minimal at best, and if he's willing to go forward with this, he's a man of his word. This is about where it's at. I mean, 30 days notice. We're talking about years past of a full year of commitment and a whole lot of tax dollars going forward for no uncertain terms. So I can fully support this, and this is the first individual contract that I can fully support. He's probably better off without a contract, but I didn't want to open the deal before it was closed.
Well, one of the reasons for the contract, too, and I don't know if either, well, I don't see Jim Sexton here, but I think with our administrator, for instance, and our county attorney, they're required to have a contract for part of the system they're in with the state. Is that correct?
Senior management.
Yeah, okay.
Senior management.
And that's the reason for the contract, and is minimal, and in fact, Mr. Sexton just came if he wants to explain that.
But it sure sounds...
That's my reason for supporting this. Plus it is. I mean, it's almost, it's
less than minimal.
Well, Mr. Polakowicz said he wanted to keep it very simple, just so you could understand it, Commissioner.
Right. And I appreciate that. And I still had a little trouble.
Commissioner, sorry, did you have any comments at this time? Or?
Not about this contract itself. I'm happy with it. I'm glad it's as simple as it is. But we've got, I believe we have some other contracts with the assistant county attorneys coming up. And in the past, I believe this body has talked about whether those contracts were appropriate. And I just wanted to ask the commissioners, fellow commissioners at this time, if they think it's appropriate to direct the county attorney not to enter into any new contracts with other assistant attorneys prior to the new attorney coming on board. I think that he ought to have as much flexibility and leeway as possible in determining the contracts he has with his subordinates and how he organizes that office.
Did you want to direct that before we get the contract signed?
If we can, I'd like to make sure that nothing happens in the office between now and him coming on board, which would interfere with him having full leeway to work on that office as he feels is best for the office.
That's a real situation, because Mr. Glenn's contract comes up for renewal March 5th. I would be here and in a position to renew it, but Mr. Polakowicz, if this contract is approved, will also be starting February 23rd, and I think he should have some discretion going forward.
As in,
It's your decision that he should.
as in what he was talking about? I mean, that's, okay.
But let me ask you a question, Will. With your attorneys, are they at will or are they have property rights?
They are at will. They have only the rights that the contract gives them, which does include severance based on years of service.
So without a contract, are they at will? I mean, still without a contract, or they have property rights?
If they agree to work without a contract or to modify their contracts to their financial detriment, I think they would go back into being property rights under the county administrative policy manual, where you can only be fired for cause and going through a progressive disciplinary process.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I really think that, people should only be fired for cause, with a contract or without a contract. I think there's a difference with you, for instance, and not you so much as with the administrator, because the administrator does the bidding that 3 out of the 5 commissioners direct him to do, and if he wasn't going to do that, I guess, well, of course, you take that a whole other way, but the bottom line is there has to be a good working relationship with the leadership, but I do think that property rights work, and I'm not a contract person, so I just don't agree with them, and I don't believe people should be terminated without cause, and if they're terminated without cause, they should have a cause of action and not have a contract. So I would agree with Mr. Solari.
Commissioner Davis?
We have a new county attorney coming in, as well as the wisdom of the existing county attorney. Let them hammer it out. And I'd like to come back with a recommendation. I do think that some of the contracts that are out there are extremely liberal in, if you will, as far as the benefits. But it is a written contract, and I'd like to know what the ramifications are of changing some of those contracts. But I'm not going to be the one delved into that. I'm going to leave that up to the co-county attorneys, I guess would be the term. But Commissioner Solari, I'm in favor of exactly what you're talking about.
So I'd be happy to go forward with this in 2 motions.
I don't think
we have one
changing anything anyway. You're just not renewing anything.
Yeah, we do have one motion to approve the county attorney employment contract with Mr. Polakowicz. Let's go ahead and deal with that. Commissioner Fleischer, do you have any further comments? Okay. The only thing I would like to add is that in my conversations with staff over this, it really wasn't even a negotiation with Mr. Polakowicz. It was just come in, sit down, talk, and a handshake, and we had the contract. So if that's any indication of the future performance we can expect out of Mr. Polakowicz, I think the county is in extremely good hands. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, in my opinion, what that is, that's indicative of his experience in the real world and how the real world works. And I think that speaks volumes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to go ahead and make another motion.
Well, can we take a vote first? Thank you. All right. No further discussion on the board. Is there any comment from the public at this point in time? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on the motion to approve the contract. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have a motion to direct the county attorney to enter into no new contracts with the assistant county attorneys or other members in his office until period, and that he allow the incoming county attorney to review those contracts and make any suggestions he has for them, and to come before the Board of County Commissioners with any proposed new contracts, at least the first time around.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, and for the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't, in light of this and that policy or ordinance that allowed this to happen, I don't know, I think prudence would suggest that we do this with the county administrator also. I know we're talking about attorney contracts here, but it's still assistants and those individuals, and of course we do have an individual under the county administrator that has a contract too, and I do not know whether it's up for renewal or what exactly could or should take place.
Good point.
But that is the whole process here, and it all really boils back down to that ordinance.
And Commissioner Solari, is it your intent that you only want there to be 2 contracts, one with the county attorney and one with the county administrator? Is that the bottom line?
It's not the bottom line, no.
Mine neither.
Okay.
I'm not saying that
on a case-by-case basis?
Well, no. What I'm thinking is we're setting precedent with contracts right here in front of us, and I do not see the benefit of having an assistant having a more lucrative contract than one of the 2 individuals that answer directly to this county commission, and I don't know where the other contracts are. I was unaware about this one coming up. by March or whenever it is, but I've made it clear that the ordinance that has allowed this to happen has given me heartburn in the past, and it has its good and its bad. The good is there's not property rights. The bad is can be lucrative severance packages attached with it, and I don't see that as having to be the case. And with that said, though, I'd like the input of Mr. Plakowicz coming in. Let him look at what's there. It's his office, or fixing to be his office to run. Come back with a recommendation for us, and it very well maybe he may come to us and say, listen, with what's in place, we need to just leave this alone. It could get worse. So I don't know. I don't have the answer, but that's why we have co-county attorneys.
You may remember that I brought a proposed amendment to that ordinance a few weeks ago, and it was your pleasure not to act, but to get input from him. So we can get together and, if necessary, even amend that ordinance.
And that's my intent I think that's Commissioner Solari's intent. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Commissioner.
Close enough. Okay. So your motion, Chris, sorry again, is just to have no new contracts signed until it comes back before the board?
Yes, okay, and that would be after the new county attorney comes in, has a chance to review them, and make his recommendations.
Okay, very good. Discussion, Commissioner Fletcher? No? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Jim, that was a great presentation.
You know what, and I do want to compliment our human HR department, Jim, taking this, the whole process. You've done a really, I would say, a yeoman's job in bringing it forward, putting it in nice, neat packages, preparing the interviews, and bringing it from one end to the next. And you did a really good job with it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to staff.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to 12I, Public Works, number 1. Right-of-way reconsideration, resolutions 2007-027, 2008-116, and 2008-139 regarding acquisition of right-of-way for county road projects. Memorandum dated January 12, 2010. And Chris, are you going to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Michael Zito, Assistant County Administrator and Acting Land Acquisition Manager. With me today is Chris Moore, Public Works Director, and Jason Brown, Budget Director.
Mike, is your mic on?
Yes.
Is it on?
Yes. Hear me better?
Yes.
Sorry. The item before you today presents an opportunity for the Commission to evaluate the results of approximately 18 months of compliance with Resolution 139 and its predecessors, and to provide direction to staff going forward. Anytime staff becomes aware of a potential collision of competing funding obligations, it is our duty to bring it before the Commission and ask for direction, and that's the only reason it's before you today. As you know, the resolution places strict time frames on land acquisition, the Land Acquisition Division of the Public Works Department to formally notify affected owners when design plans to improve their neighboring roadways reach 60% completion. Staff then endeavors to conduct good faith negotiations for 120 days, and if no agreement is reached or the time period is not mutually extended, staff is required to transfer the file to the attorney's office to be assigned to eminent domain counsel within 30 days of the declared impasse. While the pace of right-of-way acquisition appears to be accelerated under Resolution 139 and its predecessors, even with this expedited process in place, staff has transferred over 170 files to the county attorney for proceedings in eminent domain. And I would note that the year prior to the imposition of the resolution was our most expensive year in the county's history in terms of acquiring right-of-way. And you'll see that later on in the PowerPoint presentation. At the same time, the ratio of funds expended on construction as compared to funds expended on land acquisition has inverted over the past 18 months, a trend that has alerted the Budget Office to bring this matter forward along with the Public Works Department. We have prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation that highlights the issues for your consideration today, and then Chris, Jason, and I are here to take your questions. Chris?
Thanks, Mike. Chris Mora, Public Works Director for the county. As Mike mentioned, the three resolutions that we'll be focusing on were passed in 2007 and 2008, and they're up on the screen there now. What brought it to this point is back in December of last year, during a discussion about the State Road 16 58th Avenue intersection, where staff was making some changes. The right-of-way kind of grew out of that discussion, and at the time we were looking at funding, and I believe it was Commissioner Wheeler that asked that we bring that back at some point to revisit these resolutions and look at how we've been operating as far as right-of-way acquisition procedures. This is what you see up on the screen there now is our existing right-of-way acquisition process. Up at the top is where it begins. Once a proposed roadway project reaches the 60% design level, it's considered that the sides of the road, the right-of-way lines are fixed, the alignment is set, and at that point we have the necessary information from our consultant to know exactly where each property owner along that corridor will be affected, how much property we'll need from each property owner. We have the legal description and sketches that show that at that 60% design level. What those resolutions say is that at that point we send out a formal notice to owner letter to each of the impacted property owners, informing them exactly of how much property we'll need to do the project, and also informing them of their rights under the law. Following on down, staff uses either comparable sales in the area or an individual appraisal to determine what the value of that property is. Based on that appraisal or comps, we make an offer to the property owner, which then usually results in negotiations. If the negotiations go well, it proceeds over here to the left side. We reach an agreement on the price. Staff works up a purchase and sale agreement, which the property owner then signs. We then bring that purchase contract back to the board and hopefully get approval from the board, at which time we then proceed to closing and we take title of the property. If the negotiations do not go well and we do not reach an agreement on price, it proceeds over here to the right side, and we then turn that file over upstairs to the county attorney's office, and they assign it to outside counsel, and we follow the eminent domain route, which is the right side, the condemnation route. So that's our procedure, our acquisition procedure as it stands today. Very much that process is shaped by these resolutions which were passed by the board in 07 and 08. Beginning with the 2007 resolution, which was adopted in March of 07, again, as Mike mentioned, this resolution was designed to streamline the process and speed up acquisitions. It set benchmarks for certain items. Once the plans reached 30% design, we would hold a public workshop, invite the public that lives along that corridor in, show them the plans so that they begin to get an idea of how their properties would be impacted. Once it reached 60% design and the edges of the roadway and right-of-way were locked down, we would again notify the property owners. We'd follow that, as I mentioned, by 120 days of negotiations, and then following termination of negotiations, if they were terminated without an agreement, we'd follow the eminent domain route. One thing about Resolution 2007-027 is it was considered a general right-of-way policy. It was not a binding policy. It was simply a general policy that was recommended that the county follow. The 2008 resolutions, which were pretty much done in tandem, were adopted in August and September. They changed the 2007 resolution from non-binding to binding. So all of the deadlines that were laid out in the 2007 resolution, the 30 days notice to owner, the 120 days of negotiation, the 30 days assignment to outside counsel, they were made precise. They were now inflexible. We had no flexibility anymore on extending deadlines as far as the resolutions were concerned. So everything had to follow a specific deadline. Now, what are the results of those resolutions? Well, from an operational standpoint, if you look at the properties that we've actually acquired using these resolutions, and I'll bring up 66th Avenue and County Road 510 as examples, If you look at 66th Avenue and what we've acquired 61 parcels along 66th Avenue between State Road 60 on the south end and 77th Street on the north end. And if you lay them out in blocks or areas of acquisitions made, this shows you pretty much where the acquisitions are spread out on the west side of 66th Avenue and there on the east side. Those 61 parcels are kind of spread out in these areas shown in green here on either side of the roadway. If you look at the acquisitions that still need to be done, they number 54 parcels, and if you look at where they land, they're kind of spread out in the same general checkerboard pattern. And the reason it's done like this is because once we reached 60% and we began negotiating with property owners, the requests and the negotiations kind of came in from all over. We didn't really have a focus on a particular area. It was just whoever wanted to negotiate and whoever wanted to make a deal, if they were willing, those are the parcels that we pursued. And under the resolution, that's exactly what we were supposed to do. So it kind of became a hodgepodge of acquisitions, not really focusing on any one area. If you look at County Road 510, I didn't lay those out on the graphic here, but they follow the same pattern. Although we're not quite as far along, we still have 87 parcels to acquire and 44 under our belt. So it's kind of gone the same way with 510. It's kind of a checkerboard pattern all over the place, but not really focusing on any one area. Again, the results of those resolutions is that we've established a checkerboard pattern of acquisitions, and one thing that staff feels is that it's kind of restricted our ability to focus on those critical road segments where we would like to focus and which are close to full acquisition and we have construction money in the budget we'd really like to pursue. It's made us focus on everything at once.
Everything at once, you said, Chris?
Yes, sir. That ends the operational side of things. For the financial analysis, I'll turn it over to Jason Brown, our budget director.
Just before, any questions of Chris on the parcels or any of that? Okay, thank you. All right, Jason, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. Just want to go over a little bit of history of where we've been and kind of coordinate that with Chris's discussion on the operational impacts. You can see here our historic right-of-way expenditures over about the last 5 or 6 years. Back in 04-05, we acquired about $900,000 in right-of-way, and if you look at the prior years to that, we were at a similar pace, somewhere around $1 million a year most years. Sometimes there might be a large acquisition that would bump that up. As growth was happening and the road projects were accelerating, the right-of-way acquisition did accelerate to the $3-4 million range in 05 and 06, 07. And then in 2007, 2008, as the first resolution was passed, Chris mentioned the non-binding one, the right-of-way acquisition pace sped up, and through the adoption of Resolution 139, as the final form of that, the total right-of-way acquisition reached a top of about $13.3 million that year. We had a similarly high amount last year, almost $10 million. This year through December 31st, 3 months into the year, we are at $3.6 million year to date. On an annual basis, that would put us on pace to $14 million. However, I would say that's probably skewed because in there you have the Cumberland Farms is $2.7 million, so you don't know that the first 3 months, the remaining 9 months will mirror the initial 3 months. Also during that same time, we had, as everyone knows, the dramatic slowdown in construction. So our traffic impact fees, which is one of our major revenue sources to financially fund the transportation improvements, is traffic impact fees, and that's been a policy decision that was set. We have had the policy of trying to have new growth pay for its way in roads, and we have multiple revenue sources, including gas taxes at about 28% historically of the one-cent sales tax. But one of the major driving factors in our transportation improvement funding is traffic impact fees. And you can see here that we have dropped from a high of $32.8 million in 2004, 2005 to $1.6 million in the most recently completed fiscal year 2008-2009. So what you have on those last two slides is our expenditures going up, our revenues coming down precipitously 95% over that time period, which is reaching an unsustainable position. So if you look at where we were, what our actual expenditures were in 2004, 2005, 2006, we were spending about 20% of the total funds on right-of-way. The remaining 80% of funds expended was for design, engineering, construction. However, what has happened in the last couple of years is that relationship has changed. As funding has dried up, we've had to basically forestall some construction projects, push them out on the 5-year transportation capital plan. And so the relationship has changed, and as of the most recently completed fiscal year, we spent about 45% of the funds on right-of-way and 55% on construction. So what's happening is that's changing, where we're going away from 20% right-of-way, which is what FDOT experiences, what would be more typical, and our right-of-way is eating up a ever larger slice of the pie. And if you look at part of the reasoning for that, if you look at an example 5-year work program, this is the way it looked about 3 or 4 years ago. You had $350 million for construction, but the revenues dried up, so we have to cut back. Where do we have to cut back? We have to cut back on construction. The reason for that is the right-of-way we're committed to. We're in this construct where we have to continue to acquire the right-of-way. If we've reached the 60% design stage, the right-of-way has to keep being acquired. So we have to continue to budget that continued amount for right-of-way. So we have to make increasing cuts to construction each year as the funds have reduced, keeping the right-of-way protected so that we can acquire that right-of-way that the resolutions are requires us to cut back construction. So if you look, the end result of these, our recent financial situation is we had a cash balance of about $108 million back in 2005, 2006. At the time, I can remember the county being criticized for having so much money sitting there waiting for road projects, and that was a criticism leveled by various folks at various times. That balance has now dropped in that 5-year time period to $42 million, a little under $42 million. Of course, it would be higher if we didn't have the State Road 60 loan. Would be about $54 million is where we would stand now. However, this trend line is something that is a concern to us. So that's, as Mike mentioned in the opening, one of the reasons we're here is we're concerned that we're running out of the funds that we have in reserve. We don't have a lot coming in. The impact fees are down 95%. The sales tax is down. The gas tax is even down slightly. So the concern we have here is we've got this kind of scattershot approach, as Chris talked about before, where we could acquire right-of-way we could acquire half the right-of-way we need on all the road projects out there and not be able to get any of them into construction, into the ground, because we don't have a focused approach, and so that's why we're looking at a recommendation to kind of have a more focused approach. And I will turn it over to Chris.
Yes, thanks, Jason. As we've mentioned, because of the impacts to our right-of-way acquisition procedures, both operationally and financially, given the above previous information, staff is recommending that the Board of County Commissioners approve and adopt the new attached resolution, which amends previous resolutions in 07 and 08 to implement a more focused approach to right-of-way acquisition, an approach that will target only those projects that are close to full acquisition status and which are fully funded and scheduled for construction within the first 3 years of the county's 5-year capital improvement program. Now, if you look at today's capital improvement program and the CIP that the board approved last November, it would include these 7 projects: 66th Avenue between 4th Street and 16th Street, Oslo Road between 58th Avenue and 27th Avenue, 53rd Street between 58th Avenue and US 1, 26th Street between 82nd Avenue and 74th Avenue, 26th Street between 43rd Avenue and US 1, 66th Avenue between State Road 60 and 41st Street, and 43rd Avenue between 18th Street and 26th Street, which would include the State Road 60 intersection. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Commissioner Flory?
I guess this could be for Jason or Chris. One of the important things you pointed out was the decrease in monies available for construction and the increase percentage-wise of the monies needed for right-of-way. And that's, you showed the trends. But do you have an idea of what the cost is on a completed road? Or what would be the equilibrium percentage for right-of-way and for construction? That would help put this in context for me.
Well, we do have a total amount available for these 7 projects. I don't think that's what you're asking.
Not my question. My question is, in roads we've already completed, what percentage of that road have we spent on right-of-way, and what percentage of that road have we used to actually pay for the actual construction?
Well, I think we would have to look at the percentage that Jason first had. Our expenses up until 07 and 08 had been about 20 to 30% right-of-way and the balance for construction. These new projects that Jason showed where the percentage changed, those are projects where we have now been acquiring right-of-way per the 07 and 08 resolutions, not yet completing construction, so we don't know.
That's why I'm not asking about those. Okay. I'm asking about a completed road. So I'm trying to get some, I don't know what a good percentage right-of-way versus construction would be, what an equilibrium percentage would be. I'm trying to get a sense of how much we're out of whack, if we are out of whack.
Chris, I think he's asking for a rule of thumb in terms of the comparative expenditures on right-of-way and construction. However, that would largely depend on the necessity of what we need to acquire. But
understood, but I still want to
I could say that the rule of thumb is 20 to 30% right-of-way and the balance for construction. That's what DOT has traditionally used, and that's what we had been using up until 07, 08 for projects.
That's fine. That tells me that we're out of whack now, and we've got to get a better balance. Thank you.
Mr. Davis?
Mr. Chairman, Chris, would you, up until 07, 08, and looking at the dynamics of the real estate market, do you believe that is out of whack until 07, 08 because of the values of land?
No, it's now out of whack because we are now concentrating on buying right-of-way as opposed to just buying right-of-way as opposed to also getting roadway construction projects out the door. If we hadn't been buying right-of-way in such a broad, scattershot pattern, we would have been able to focus on just those projects that we needed to get out the door, that were close to 100% plans and permitting, and that were close to full acquisition. We wouldn't, for example, we wouldn't have been buying right-of-way all along County Road 510 when County Road 510 construction is out in years 4 and 5 of the 5-year plan. We would have focused more on just those 7 projects that I've got shown there.
Mr. Chairman, looking at these 7 projects here, how much right-of-way is left that we need to purchase?
To give some examples, 66th Avenue between 4th Street and 16th Street, we've got one large parcel right on the north end of that project, Laurel Homes. That's the main one that we need to take that project to construction. There are some smaller pieces along the side streets that intersect with 66, but mostly it's the Laurel Homes piece. Oslo Road between 58th Avenue and 27th Avenue. We've now come to terms with Cumberland Farms. We own that property. It just becomes a matter of scheduling them to exit the gas station. So we own that now. There's one piece at the corner of 58th Avenue and Oslo that we need, the Farish piece. Once we have that parcel, we'll be able to go to construction for that entire 2 miles of road. 53rd Street between 58th Avenue and US 1, we've got all the right-of-way, but it's now a mixed agreement between ourselves, DeVasta, and North American Properties, who has committed to building a portion of that road also. So the right-of-way is all ready for that. 26th Street between 82nd and 74th, now that we've purchased the Bailey property, we have all the right-of-way we need for that. That one's down to cost. 26th Street between 43rd Avenue and US 1, which is the piece of Aviation Boulevard in the city. All the right-of-way is acquired for that. We've got some along 43rd Avenue. The county had planned to build our section from 26th Street south to State Road 60 at the same time the city built theirs. We've got one piece down by the Nino's restaurant there at 60 and 43rd that we have to acquire. 66th Avenue between State Road 60 and 41st Street. We've got 2 or 3 pieces left in there, probably closer to 5 left in there that we have to get. And then 43rd Avenue between 18th Street and 26th Street. We've got some south of 60 between 18th and 20th Street that we still need to get. So we're close on these 7 projects, and we'd like to focus on just them so we can get these projects out the door.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher?
Mr. Moore, I did have a question as to the selection of the 7 projects, and I believe you've just answered that. My concern was that it was not on needs and necessity as opposed to the amount of right-of-way that had been purchased up to this point.
Well, it's both. We see that we can get these projects out the door quickly. They're fully funded within the first 3 years of our road program. And these are areas that we've been focusing on. They are areas where congestion is increasing and we're getting close to level of service issues. So it's a little bit of all of those things, right-of-way, needs, and close to being complete for design and right-of-way acquisition.
And earlier, during the presentation, the previous segment, you'd mentioned something about speed, that was a primary focus on how we had gravitated to where we are today and the resolution. And the second resolution, that timeliness or the speed was of a major factor, a major importance. I don't recall that from the discussion. I believe timeliness was a factor, but I think timeliness was discussed for fairness and communication and giving a timeline so that the impacted citizens knew where they stood and how far they had to go, and more or less place them in a more favorable position to carry through with their decision-making process as well as our decision-making process. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yes, I think that's true. A lot of folks that lived along 66th Avenue felt that they were kind of in limbo. They didn't know where they stood as far as right-of-way acquisition with the county stood, and so they needed some closure. And they wanted to know. They wanted to get the process moving so that they knew where they stood with their property, and I think that was a large amount of their concerns on that.
Because the resolution that exists before today, and it clearly states that there is a procedure to follow, and I believe it's all about fairness and communication. And I just wanted to make the point known that during the conversations that we've had over the past few years, I don't think the primary thrust was speed and let's get this project done, and I don't want it to be shedding light that perhaps maybe we're trying to rush this along and ran out of money. I don't want anybody to think that at all.
Well, it's not all fairness. It wasn't all fairness and communication. Not entirely. Not by far. It was some fairness and communication. It was one is that I will tell you, some of it was finance. Some of it was, the ability to get the projects done. And the other part, it wasn't all finance. It wasn't all that. It was all 3 of those. I can tell you right now that I don't think we'll have to worry if we continue on where we're going about us doing roads, because we won't have the money to do them. Well, so with that, if we keep on the track, we're like every county and every county in the nation, every state project, they've all had to cut back. They've had to reanalyze in this environment. We are no different. But it wasn't all by that. I would not use the word all by any means.
I wouldn't, okay, it's not all, but I'll tell you that most of the communications coming in was about the fact that most of the citizens did not know we weren't doing a very good job of ensuring that they had the best in notification. They did not know where they stood at the timeline. I think we heard the term willy-nilly. There was some discussion that they were not getting proper information. They were getting their information from the street. I do recall that conversation, and I believe that was the primary thrust, primary thrust, not the sole thrust, that we were concerned, that the people were concerned that they were not getting the best information forward so they can assemble and pattern their lives based on the structure of how we were moving forward with a road project.
I have to disagree from the staff. It wasn't our primary. I do have to disagree with that. It's financial and need for the roads.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner
Thank you.
Davis.
Yes. Mr. Moore, what is going back to the slide that you had there with the 7 projects, what do you anticipate is the total construction and right-of-way acquisition to finish up those 7 projects? And I'm assuming that, just to reiterate and I have it clear in my mind, this is in the 3 years of our CIP?
Right. These projects here are in the first 3 years, and I think when we totaled it up before, it was about $66 million was the total amount that we have funded in the first 3 years to finish design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction for these 7 projects.
Okay. And then going back to the revenues that we have coming in, or that we have on hand with your bar graph there, and I'm trying to project that out. Do we have the money to do what we're talking about doing in front of us? Well, you could use that, but I was,
Go the other way, Chris.
That one. Oh. Back one.
It's the one that has the graph where it showed the loan to the DOT. I believe that's the best one.
It was that.
No,
right.
no, keep going, keep going.
It's
No.
Right there.
That's funds available.
Okay. Now, when you combine funds available with projected revenues 3 years out, I'd like to see a graph of that, if at all possible, or just, if not, no, not a graph, excuse me.
I think when we projected, we projected out that we are going to run out of cash. We're going to increase gas tax. We're going to borrow money when we project out. Those are things which means we're going to increase ad valorem taxes. And the environment we're in.
And that's what I'm wondering is, where is that in our, where does that happen and combine with trying to get, 510, I mean, there's not a person up here that doesn't want 510 and 66th Avenue done. At the same time, I think everybody would like to have these 7 projects. Where do we sit with that whenever you put those 2 together as far as our 3-year capital improvements that we're already counting for concurrency? We've got to have that in place, and we've got dollars in reserve as well as some kind of income coming in, although at off historic lows as far as the impact fees and sales tax, and nobody has shown me where those 2 come together yet.
Okay, what we have, the current 5-year transportation plan is $199 million. So roughly $200 million, we'll call it $200 million.
Is there a way of staying in the 3-year right now? Because we're going to be shifting from 5 to 3s to 5 to 3s, and my simple mind can't keep that up, if at all possible. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things that concerns me the most is the issue of concurrency that Chris has mentioned. And just because it's in the 5-year plan doesn't mean we count for concurrency, but if it's in the 3-year plan, in fact, we do.
The first 3 years is roughly about $105 million.
Okay, so we're 90 million. Okay, all right, 105. And then we got 66 million that we're talking about using for the 7 projects in the next 3 years. So that leaves us a balance of, we're going to say 40 million. Okay, and that 40 million you're saying will not get done, the projects that we have that are inside the 60% design phase, or excuse me, not even the projects, just the right-of-way acquisition, it won't be enough, or will it?
Not in the current structure. If we're buying it all over the place, it doesn't seem like we will have funds. We project that on our current pace, we will run out of cash balance.
And Jason, that includes putting a bond out, though, right? So what are the projections without putting a bond out? How much is available in those 3 years? Because the bond was like, what, 50 million or something?
The bond
right?
was $51 million. What we assumed in the 5-year plan was that we would levy the additional 6 cents of gas tax in year 4, which is 2012-13. And then we would bond all of our gas tax, which is our only real bondable revenue source here. Because impact fees, you can't bond. 1 cent sales tax, you could typically bond. However, if for practical purposes, that levy runs out in 2019, so we're looking at a 9-year bond issue, not really that feasible. So if you look, we are assuming to get that 5-year plan balance, which doesn't have 510 fully funded, doesn't have all these road projects fully funded, even at that. We are assuming the levying of an additional 6 cents of gas tax that's available to us, which is doubtful. It's certainly not a sure thing, and then bonding that money for the next 20 years, which in year 6 you have to realize that even if we do levy the additional 6 cents, we bond it in year 5, we've used up all of our gas tax for the next 20 years. We won't have that $5 or $6 million revenue stream of gas tax that we would normally have. We're committing that to the road projects that we need, and currently that proposal doesn't even fund all of the road projects, such as 510.
We're about due for a break. Let me do this. Jason, can you, while we're on break, I think put together the 3-year numbers that Commissioner Davis is asking for and put it on even if you just have to scratch it out and throw it up on the Elmo, and then
yeah, please, because you started in the bonding side of it, and the bond not taking place to the 4th year, but I'm just asking about the first 3. Okay. And so you're talking about revenues that I'm not talking about even utilizing, and in addition to that, just to kind of let everybody start thinking of where I'm going in my mind. On County Road 510, we have several projects that we have developments that are in fact taking our stormwater, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe those are going to be moving forward in the future within the next 3 years. They may, and if they do, fine. But if not, we don't have any place to put it. And so, regardless of where the design is, we can't move forward without stormwater retention, and therefore that whole road project, in my opinion, is on hold to begin with until such time we get some development happening back along the 510 corridor.
That's very true, and it makes it difficult, for us to nail down the design and follow up with St. John's for permitting, because we don't know where the ponds will be. So it does kind of hamstring us as far as design.
And I'm assuming that is a part of the 40% that is not finished with the design. I mean, or when you factor that in, does that then reduce the design back below the 60% threshold? And I'm not trying to play games. I'm just trying to be realistic here about when we can expect these projects to move forward. And I don't see County Road 510 moving forward that fast.
Well, usually by 60%, you have a good idea where your pond sites are going to be because you've made advanced contact with property owners along that way. But with us notifying owners at 60%, the acquisition would come later. Okay. So you're right.
And then I have a question, and this is a legal question then. Mr. Collins, with these agreements that we have and properties perhaps going through the foreclosure process, do those agreements, and does that right that we have, if you will, does that interest that we have in those retention ponds get scrubbed when it comes through the foreclosure process?
Are you talking about we have a contract on a property and it goes into foreclosure?
No. We have agreements with PDs or subdivisions taking our drainage and retention. Then it goes through the foreclosure process. Does our interest stay there once?
Well, it depends the stage that these developments get to. If they've been platted, yes, our interest stays there, and whoever takes the property out of foreclosure would be bound by whatever conveyances had been made by the prior developer.
Now, am I safe to assume that if it goes through bankruptcy, that those entitlements could be scrubbed? And I'm just saying that because I know that a bankruptcy judge can scrub condominium documents.
No. Bankruptcy can set aside unexecuted contracts or conveyances, but once the dedications are made or the property is transferred, that couldn't be set aside in bankruptcy.
Okay. All right. Jason, if you can get those numbers. Mike, you got one thing real quick?
Just one last comment on the communication side of the House in response to Commissioner Flesher's concerns. The board expressed a great deal of attention on communication back in June of 2008, and that's when staff endeavored to improve that system in accordance with the resolution that was proposed that is a predecessor to Resolution 139. In fact, it was Resolution 116. And that was ordered by the BCC in June of '08. The next day, Public Works submitted the draft notice to owner to the attorney's office to be included in all the mailings that the commission was concerned about. That was June 4th of '08. We received that back from the attorney's office in August of '08. And then on September 16th, you all passed the resolution that we're bound by now, which is 139. By the end of the year, we had sent out every notice to owner required under that resolution and compiled a very detailed manual of status and accountability of those acquisitions. And then within 120 days, the time had run and we had transferred most of those files into the attorney's office. So that's where we are right now, procedurally, and with respect to communication, your directives have been followed.
And we're also here today to communicate to the public and everyone else that our financial picture has changed. We want to communicate that if we don't change our ways as a staff, that we're going to have serious financial problems. So that's why we're here to communicate.
Okay, thank you. And when we come back, we'll also open up to the public for comment at that time, but we're going to go ahead and adjourn for a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 10:55. Go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Jason is working up those numbers. So Commissioner Slurry, you had some comments? Or you want to wait till?
I'll wait till after the public speaks.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler, do you have anything? Okay. At this time, is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on the matter at hand? Welcome. Your name and address for the record, please.
Joseph Paladin, President of Black Swan Consulting. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. I mean, number one, I realize we have a basis to work with here. I know we can't spend money we don't have. Maybe unlike the federal government, I know we're being conservative in only spending money we have. And I understand that, so that's my basis. Back when 027 was done, we started that with the Growth Awareness Committee, if you recall. Our intent on doing that was to give people a timeline and an outline of what they could expect down the road. Now, at that time, when 027 came forward, the financial situation in the county was extremely different than it is today. No question about that. But that was why some of the things went into 027 that we put into 027.
Quick.
And we brought that forward 3 times before we got it approved. A couple of times, Mr. Collins sent us back to redo the wording, and we did. But that was the intent of the origination. And the same thing onward with 116. And now 139 we spent a lot of time on. But anyway, having said all that, one of the questions I have is Mike Zito made a statement here just a few minutes ago that he sent 170 cases to the county attorney's office regarding these subjects. Is that right, Mike?
Approximately, yes, sir.
Wow. I had no idea. How many of those cases have gone through the attorney's office and been moved on?
I recently asked for an active case list from the county attorney's office and received a list of 15 active files that have been referred to outside counsel.
Well, I see Bill's here. I'll let Bill answer the question.
Which is correct.
Okay.
And the others would be in active negotiations, purchases, settlements, what have you.
All right. Am I suggesting that we stop buying right away? No. I know we need to keep buying right away. At what rate? I think our financial situation would dictate at what rate we should keep buying right away. I think that we basically need a public workshop in order to figure out what priorities we have and what right-of-ways we should pursue. If there's some areas that should be phased in where we have like 1 acquisition or 2 acquisitions that could get us into construction, and it's in our 3-year plan, I think we need to go forward with that. I think that my suggestion before I sat down would be, seeing as how we have a new attorney coming in here who's going to have to be a part of all this, I would suggest we have a workshop, a new attorney once he takes over, and sit down and we all sit down and decide where we're going with this. I think that's the direction that I would head in. I think we have a lot of questions here. A couple years ago, I know Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Wheeler worked trying to get right away under one roof, under one head, to maybe reorganize it a little bit better. Maybe we should look back into that and consider that being put together again. I think all these things should be brought up and answered, but I think maybe we should do that with our new attorney coming aboard, seeing as how Mr. Collins is going to retire very soon. I would suggest having a workshop, though, because we have a whole lot of questions. And then as far as where we go with right-of-way, and as far as where we go with approvals, again, a lot more questions. Have we approved any projects where we're not going forward with the improvements? If we did approve projects and now we're not going forward with the improvements, where does that put us with the projects we approved? Do we have trips and concurrency coming back online because of the building slowdown? Those numbers should be taken into consideration on where we should acquire right away and go forward. We have a lot of questions that we need to answer, and I think we need a public workshop to get to that point to answer these questions. But again, the only problem I have is that all these 3 policies we brought forward in order to keep the people involved, aware, and give them their rights so they knew exactly where it was going. I hate to go back to 43rd Avenue, but going all the way back to 43rd Avenue, which 2 of you commissioners were here during that, and that was part of the problems. People were intimidated because they didn't know what to expect. And that's what we had on 66th Avenue until these policies were put into effect. So I think we need to take all that into consideration before we go forward. And I would ask you all to have a public workshop before we do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ruth. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Stanbridge. I live at 4835 66th Avenue. It's been a long 4 years, and we're back again. And we're only here to talk about procedures. It's a tangled web sometimes when we in government, and sometimes it's because of deceptive practices, sometimes not. But when we received this memorandum, there was 3 areas that I wanted to address. First, there can only be one official resolution at a time, and I know that the other 2 came in play, but the one currently in play is Resolution 139. And in the memo it says that these resolutions were designed to accelerate the right-of-way acquisition process by implementing a more rigid timetable. That's just not true. Resolution 139, the one we're working on now, guarantees that all landowners are given their rights through the notice to owner. That wasn't really done before. And the reasonable timeline that is available for both sides, it's a reasonable timeline. It's days and months and sometimes years. And that was all mutually agreed upon by all parties and unanimously voted on by the Board of County Commissioners in August of 08. And I have the minutes if you want to see those. And they actually came from the clerk's office. And I don't believe you've received a copy of Resolution 139, and I think Charlene has one for each of you.
We've got it right here.
You got one?
Sure.
Okay. Who needs one? Because I think you need to compare these 2 resolutions. Staff is acting that this new proposed resolution be amend the previous one. But when you compare the 2, you'll see that this new resolution actually abolishes most of 139 for most of the landowners in the county. In the new resolution, there is no whereas, and that's number 4 in the old one, that says the county desires to implement a policy to ensure that all homeowners and property owners are treated in a uniform and consistent manner when the county seeks to purchase property for right-of-way purposes. The number 1 through 5 on the second page does not even appear in the new one. It's gone. It's eliminated. Forget it. Number 3 in the old 139, or the current 139, at the top of the page, provides the opportunity for citizens and landowners to have an open house or workshop at 30% design. And what if the landowners need a public hearing? The folks on 66th Avenue was denied a public hearing 4 years ago in 06 by the current Board of County Commissioners and County Administrator because it would delay the construction on the road. So we never even had a public hearing. So now these opportunities are totally abolished. Also gone is all of number 4, which has 6 points. And in those 6 points, both parties will be losing opportunities, time frames. In the case of the homeowners, the notice of their statutory rights pursuant to Section 73.015 of the Florida statutes. You know, we came to you in 06, several of us, to talk about our rights. We came to you in 07 to talk about our rights. And finally, when we noted that criminals get rights, we were finally given the notice to owners, which tells us if we want to, we can go and hire an attorney, and the county would pay for it. Up to that time, people thought and were told that they had to pay for their own attorney. So remember, all of this in 139 was mutually agreed. I stood here, you guys sat there, and we went through point after point after point. And those are in that minutes that I just mentioned. The second point of confusion in this body of this memo are sentences, graphs, charts that insist that the right-of-way cost is very expensive, and I totally agree, and Chris did a great job with his PowerPoint. He's getting really good. But if the county or the state is determined to build roads, whether it be 4 lanes, 6 lanes, 8 lanes, through commercial properties, through homes, business, and farms, you need to be prepared to pay the expense. This commission and the MPO, the advisory committees, and the county staff have all said over and over that we must have these roads. If I remember correctly, from my days on the commission as an MPO member, design or planning and design was followed by acquisition. The FDOT, the Florida Department of Transportation, calls their procedure PD&E, planning, which is design, development, which is the acquisition and getting ready, and of course the final phase is engineering. I also recall that the right-of-way acquisition for DOT actually starts at 30%. It's accelerated at 60%. And I can tell you on 66th Avenue, the design is well over 90%. So could the initial planning for the county's road system way back when have been so poorly done that the county now finds itself with no right-of-way, as Chris called it, scattered approach, and no money? We tried to focus it with this 139 so you would stay on task with the 60%, the 80%, the 90%. Could the funds that were dedicated, impact fees and gas tax, after all, you wouldn't have started a design project without dedicated funds, have they been diverted to other capital improvement projects and can't be brought back? Could it be that the original plan was to use whatever means, no matter how heavy-handed or devious, to acquire the right-of-way from the landowners with little or no expenditure by county? And we've already seen the Murphy Act. We've already seen where we have complained about our older people and our sick people being approached with contracts that they didn't have their notice to owner. Whatever the case, the elimination of Resolution 139 seems to be very important to the county staff. But I can tell you it's not important. It cannot happen to the people of this county. An elimination of Resolution 139 for any elected officials may be a very deep hole. Been there, done that. The third area that I want to talk about is the list of road projects with this recommendation. This list seems to be much like the one that the Public Works Department floated in November of '02. I'm older than all of you, and I remember it, and I hope that you guys remember it. We were before you 3 times that month. These roads that's on that list, these 7 roads, that if they are constructed would not relieve greatly any of the major transportation problems we currently have. You will get a road built. That'd be great. But it wouldn't really solve a lot of our problems. For instance, number 1, 66th Avenue between 4th Street and 16th Street. I brought this up in 2008. This is a dirt road and has been a dirt road since 1915. This is the south end of 66th Avenue. It was laid out by Indian Rim Farms with their grid of canals and roadways. This road leads only to residentials and farms, and very few of those. If built out as a new 2-lane road, it would only still lead to these residents and farms. To the south, this section of 66 only goes to the pavement at Oslo. It doesn't even connect into St. Lucie County. To the north, unless there is a bridge across the main relief canal, it won't even get to 16th Street. And I understand you have a big block of Laurel homes that you have to purchase there even to get the bridge. And even if you put the bridge in place, you can get to 16th. Well, that's the College Lane. So now the traffic would have to weave through College Lane to get on 58, where you have this new intersection there at the power plant, or you will have, where the traffic will all be congested again. So I can't see constructing that roadway is going to create any viable transportation corridor for anyone in the near future. So when this roadway discussion came up in November of 2008, this board was steadfast in telling the county staff to defer any and all construction projects if necessary, so right-of-way could be acquired for roads with higher priorities. And you all know how many folks are out there that are in limbo, where you have designated a road, you are now 90%, and they have been sitting there for 4 years wondering what was going to happen to them next. After all, you can't build any roads if you don't have right-of-way. I mean, that's just common sense. The staff in Daly did not want to hear, or certainly did not listen, and had tried 2 more times in November of 2008 to rescind, to abolish, and to eliminate Resolution 139. And here they are again. So it is insulting to us, and it's outrageous to us, and it should be to you, that this has been to tried again to abolish a mutually agreed upon resolution which gives all landowners their rights. You know, this is a very serious matter. We've been before you time and again, and we thank you for allowing us to speak. I know this is departmental, and normally you don't get to speak except in public hearings. I don't believe that this commission or any commission would ever consider going back to the days when there was no procedure that a landowner could depend upon. In this case, Resolution 139, when the landowner had no guarantee that they would be given their rights under their notice to owner, when the commissioners could not ensure, and I'm quoting again from that whereas in Resolution 139, ensure that all landowners and property owners are treated in a uniform and consistent manner. Unfortunately, after what we've been through in the past few years, dealing with some of the heavy-handed and questionable practice of the county, it's going to take a long time before some credibility and trust is reestablished. I hope this Board of Commissioners can do that. But until that time, we recommend strongly that this entire memorandum and its recommendation be denied. Thank you. Any questions?
Commissioner Davis?
Chris, on 66th Avenue, is from 4th Street to 16th Street, is there going to be a bridge across the Relief Canal?
Yes, there will. It'll connect in
this project, in 66?
It's part of the 4th to 16th construction. Yes.
That line item number 1?
That's correct, sir. Okay.
What does that cost?
That's a very large bridge. It'd probably be on the order of $2 million.
Okay. And so that fits very well into your transportation plan, or is it just to get the project done?
Well,
no, it does fit into our plan. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Commissioners also asked us to do connectivity. They want us to bring 8th Street, 12th Street, and have them all go through other streets that are paved so that we can get people to bypass 58th and 60th. That's a request of the commissioners, and they want a connectivity, so that's what it does. It gives people other avenues that are not dirt roads to get past routes and around the congestion, and that's the idea. Also, I think that we weren't trying to take any. We should incorporate all your rights into this resolution. That's not a problem.
It's not in there, Mr. Bayer.
Well, we can. I mean, that is not meant. We can incorporate all those, and it doesn't make a difference.
Then it should be just denied till we can see the document completed.
Well, let me say one thing. It's not unusual to have where we were at 90% or 100% designed and all the right-of-way. The state, for instance, Route 60, they had all the right-of-way. They had to pull it off because of money. Palm Beach has had 7 major roads, 100% designed, 100% right-of-way. Couldn't afford to do them. It's a changing times. And as far as us, I don't. You made mention of money disappearing, going. And I think we are probably we have all our accountability of all our impact fee money. And if you think it's gone somewhere it shouldn't, besides roads, which you insinuated, please go to the state attorney's office because we're clean as can be.
No, I have no problem with that, but you are absolutely right. To buy your right-of-way, to have it ready when you have construction money is the only way to go. This is what this board said in 2008. They said buy the right-of-way, forego, defer construction until you have the right-of-way. Once you have the right-of-way, hopefully, the climate will change, the tax dollars, the gas tax monies will come in, the impact fees come in, you'll be ready to go with construction. I mentioned too before, with the stimulus plan, if you had your right-of-way on some of these, all the right-of-way, focused on the right-of-way on these roads, you may have some state and federal dollars coming down. But when you have here and this and that, and Chris mentioned scatter approach, that is not what the citizens came to say. Focus on right-of-way. Focus. Get us out of our misery. It will take you out of your misery, and you'll be ready to construct roads as soon as you have the money.
That's why we're doing this, as we prioritize those roads, as we get them ready, so as we'll be available for state and federal
You
funding.
have to prioritize the people on the roads. You have to get the people out of their misery.
May I just add, it's important to recognize that Public Works is 100% in compliance with this resolution. 100%. I don't think you can become any more focused than to follow the resolution to the letter and transfer the files as it requires us to do. And we've transferred 170 of them for eminent domain proceedings. So that's where the resolution's taken us. So I really want to remind the public and the commission that we are focused and we have accomplished the directives of the resolution to 100%.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that wishes to speak on this subject? It's not a public hearing. If we go down and someone does wish to speak, I will recognize them. Any comments, Commissioner Slurry?
I've got a few. This whole Resolution 139 on the road building is kind of like my relationship with my car. I know when it's broken. I don't know how to fix it. But I know since I've been on the county commission, this has been one of the most contentious, convoluted issues going. I don't think we're going to solve it all one day, but I think that the staff has made an attempt to work towards a better solution. And we've got Ruth and people from 66th Avenue who are holding our feet to the fire. I think both of those are good things. I think that this board actually some months past directed staff to make some priority roads so that we could get some roads built when we got the understanding that we're going to run out of funds. And I certainly don't want us to get to the point where 3 years from now we've spent all the reserves, bought all the right-of-way, but have not laid any more usable road. I think that we've gone in a good direction of purchasing right-of-way. Now we need, in light of the fiscal situation, to rebalance things. I'm not sure that we've gone far enough along the path to say why we've prioritized these roads. I'd like to see probably one more detail in the choices that were made, in that, as I understand it, some of these roads were a lot closer to being able to construct because we only have one or two pieces of right-of-way left. I'd like to get a little more clarity on how many pieces of right-of-way we have to get for each road, how much that might cost, and then how much the whole road might cost. And that would probably give me a little more comfort that we're going in the right direction. I have to say that Mr. Powell, I think, was hitting something right when he said that we ought to ask the new county attorney to take a look at this. I think that the board ought to ask him to make this Resolution 139 or right-of-way one of the issues which he ought to bring himself up to speed with as soon as possible when he gets into office, and ask him to work with Mr. Zito, Jason, and Mr. Moore to take both the concerns of the citizens and the concerns of the county, or the limitations the county has, and try to come up with a better process. Personally, I think the present process is broken in some fundamental way. I don't really understand what way that is, but I don't think we can go forward quite the way it is. I don't think that any of the commissioners want to do anything which saves money on right-of-way purchases at the detriment of any of the citizens. I think we've been very clear on that, and we will be going forward. But again, I don't want to get to the point where we've bought right-of-way but cannot do any roads because we spent all the money on right-of-way.
Thank you. Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, this is a little,
Thank you.
I don't know, almost depressing, I guess. It's like somebody said once, when you try to foretell the future, you're either lucky or you're wrong. And we had a lot of money coming in. We had massive growth happening. We had needs to plan, and it all came to a screeching halt. And one of my main concerns is staying on track. I think Indian River County is probably in better financial shape than most of the counties in the state of Florida. And I'd say that's primarily because of Mr. Baird's direction, and Jason and our staff, and the way we do business and pay as we go. We've only got so much money to do something with, and if I understand this correctly, I hate to see us buy right away and continue buying right away when we can't afford to put the roads in. I think I would rather have the money in the ground, in roads, and put others on hold. And I know that's not palatable to some people, but I think, like business, government has to make hard choices. And Mr. Baird's made some hard choices here and runs this probably more like a business than a government entity. And even though it's tough, I appreciate that. People have lost their jobs, people have got laid off, money's not coming in, business is off, they're not building houses, there's not impact fees. And I think we have to go back and reprioritize where we are, what we want, and what we're going to spend the money that we have on. I'm not even sure that I'm in favor of a bond on future gas tax, because I don't even know where that's going. If the current federal administration has their way with cap and trade, you'll have to see gas go to $5 or $6 or $7 a gallon. People aren't going to be buying it, and we're not going to be having any money coming in. So I think it's again trying to foretell the future, and we don't know what the future holds at this time. But I do think, and that's why I brought it up a while back, that we need to reprioritize and take a hard look at this. And I don't know if the list of 7 here is the correct list or not, but I certainly think that rather than buying right away and having property set and building no roads isn't as wise as at least putting the roads in that we can afford to put in, even if we have to put others on hold. And it's just a matter of economics and income. And if somebody's got a better solution than that, I'd love to hear it. I'm open to suggestions and recommendations.
Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Commissioner Wheel, I'll agree with less words, but I do want to get a point across. As far as, we have just about 4 or 5 weeks before our new attorney will be here. Our new attorney who we've just approved a contract that is representative of his pattern, his decision-making process that he displayed in attempting to secure this job. He did talk about right-of-way concerns and localizing a lot of the efforts and reducing the costs. And so far, if I read Alan correctly, that we can envision a far more streamlined and economically feasible approach. And I would like the new attorney to be able to be part of this decision-making process and not change the rules and not forego 139, which incidentally was designed and crafted not in the best of times and not in the worst of times, but it was when we were amidst the change that we are currently suffering. I will say suffering because this is about economics, but I don't believe that if we look at this with a fresh set of eyes with the new attorney, that perhaps maybe we can come to the best conclusion for the citizens and for the county. And I don't think much acquisition work is going to be done in the next month that's going to alter the decision process. I don't believe that moving this today would be the wisest decision to make. We've heard earlier that we'd like to wait and see where the new attorney would like to rein in on and discuss and represent, and I think we heard it on 2 separate occasions. I'd like to mention it once again. I don't think it's appropriate to make changes today when we can make those changes at a far more considering time with the fresh resources available.
I don't think that was less words.
I was trying, but I'll do a word count when it's all over.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As far as the 1 through 7, I don't think there's anybody up here that would object to that those are important and want to move those forward. I guess really what brought this whole process forward a couple years ago was the way, whether perceived or reality, depending on which side you ask, individuals were being treated along the roads that were being widened. And there was the lack of certainty, the lack of process, or the lack of even a due process that really the residents or the individuals were asking for some certainty to take it outside the realm or even some of the responsibility of the county administration and even put it into the court's hands because there was more trust there. With that being the case, there are certain parties that I have more compassion for. I have compassion for all of them that truly are in the eminent domain process. But even at the level of, I don't want to call it sophistication, but at least the level of knowledge about the process, I would say that a homeowner, a homesteaded property, I would say deserves more consideration than a Cumberland Farms. Mm-hmm. They have their attorneys, they know their rights, and they know that we can't wear them down. Right. On the other side of that, I have a lot of compassion for those, and don't take this wrong, but the old-timers on 66th Avenue that don't know whether they're going to have a front porch in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. And I don't know whether this resolution addresses the differences, whether with the resolution we can address the differences. But there's clearly, in my opinion, some common sense that needs to be sprinkled into this that says, okay, if you want to work something out with the county, that's fine. If you want to go ahead and and if we're disagreeing as a county versus a private individual, then here's your rights. Let's go ahead and go through whichever process you choose. I think that we could almost accomplish that somehow if legally it can be done. And clearly the residents of 66th Avenue, they said, get this over with. Let us know where we stand. I think we owe that to them regardless of what road they live on, whether it's 510. On the other side of that, it's more of a convenience perhaps for the Benak family to be able to take care of, to at least know what trees they're going to have and to be able to plan their irrigation system accordingly. But it's not a life-changing event for them to worry about whether or not they're going to have 3 acres less on that segment of 66th Avenue. So regardless of where we move with this, the direction or how we move, I think, is extremely important to try to at least give the option to those property owners that have a homesteaded property that we are looking at either in the short term or a longer period of time, to give them, I think, the courtesy and the respect that I would want to have if it were my front yard and my homestead.
Question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Are you recommending or are you saying that, and I agree with everything you said, by the way, but there's got to be a solution. And is your proposed solution that you make buying right away on 66th Avenue a priority over building roads?
I don't think that's the prudent way to create policy.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no. But what I think it would be prudent for us to somehow let everybody know what their rights are, especially if they're homesteaded, and ask them what they would like to do. Do they want to not deal with it because we don't mind putting it off as long as you'd like to? Do you want a quick resolution because we can have this wrapped up to the point where we can take possession of the property in, I don't know, what is the quick take process? 180 days? How many? 120? 120. I mean, so, but the main thing is that Cumberland Farms knows that. Cumberland Farms knows they can come back before us like they did today and lease back their facility. An individual that doesn't know what they have as far as their rights and all they see is the county, and didn't take this wrong, but really our approach on so much of this has been, we'd like to buy it. No, we don't. Here it is. No, it's not. We didn't say that. It's not in writing. And after a while, you just get to the point where the residents just want to throw up their arms and say, give me some relief.
Well, and I understand, but I think this resolution that we did last year kind of clarified a lot of that. And as Mr. Baird said, if this was incorporated in the new resolution, my problem is and my dilemma is, and quite frankly, I'll tell you, in retrospect, which gives you 20/20 vision, we're far too aggressive on 66. I don't think we need a 200-foot right-of-way. I don't think we need an ultimate 6-lane. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I don't like filling the county up, as we said, the MPO with 4 lanes and 6 lanes, and we need more connectivity. We need more grid system. We need other options for cars to move to keep the main roads clear of traffic. So, but the problem is the damage has been done, and we've set that forward. And I don't know what the solution is to that. If I could turn the clock back, I'd have a different approach. But that can't be done. But I agree with everything you're saying, Wesley. And my position has always been, I don't care if you're living in a 12 by 12 room on a 50-foot wide lot. If that's your house, it's your domicile. That's what's important to you a lot more than. I was in business, had commercial, and I had home. And I'll tell you what. Catching a burglar in each one of those facilities, I would treat them differently in my business than I would in my home. So it's the point is that absolute priority to the homeowner over the commercial.
Mr. Collins, can we do that with an ordinance of some kind, or and I don't even know how we would word it, but
Well, I'm not sure that 139 doesn't address that in some ways already, because if people do want the certainty, they have the 120-day negotiation period, and if they're not satisfied that things are moving along, it goes into court. There's also the possibility, if people are not anxious, that they can voluntarily extend that negotiation time under the existing resolution. So I think there is the flexibility to treat people as they wish to be treated, depending on their own preference, to move it into condemnation and get resolution, or to leave negotiations open. Maybe things will change. We'll just put things in abeyance.
And so I'm assuming the notice to owners of the 117 that 170, those were notice to owners. Those were those individuals that said, you know what, sue me.
No, they were under the resolution. That was the amount of files that the resolution required us to immediately transfer following the expiration of 120 days after delivery of the notice to owner. So all that's happening is we're sending files en masse up to the attorney's office, and that's all that's happening.
Well, I'm good. Okay, not that I'm good with that, no. But looking at it from the standpoint of what is next with those files.
The resolution requires the attorney's office to assign those files to outside counsel.
You're a little too close, Mike.
Within 30 days of their receipt of the file.
And that's not based on what they desire, they being the individual property owners. That's just based on our resolution.
But that has not happened.
Okay. And so we don't know whether the individuals want us to do this, to bring this to outside counsel or not. Our resolution automatically requires it.
Commissioner Davis, if I might, Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. The resolution allows for continued negotiations, and many of the files that have been sent up after the 120-day period has expired, the landowners are, just as you say, desirous of continued negotiations, albeit at a very slow pace. They want to see what happens with the project. They want to see what phases, what timelines develop before them. Some of them don't know if they want to sell the whole parcel or a part of their parcel, especially some of the landowners on the northern part of 66th Avenue. They're content with just a wait-and-see attitude.
But now, Bill, does that violate our ordinance?
The resolution, no, because they're agreeing with just, continuing with the negotiations as they are. The other thing that the Commission has to understand is that many of the 170 files have either been resolved, there have been redesigns with US 1510, where right-of-way has been changed, especially on the north end of 66. When we've changed consultants, we've had to redo groups of sketch and legals, thank you, sketch and legal descriptions. So, while the rigid requirements of the resolution has created a backlog, if you will, because you can't treat just as you want to. You can't treat every single landowner in the same fashion.
I think one of the problems is when you look at our whole environment we're in, our revenues have dried up. Our growth is not what we had projected either. Not only our revenue isn't coming out, our roads, we're seeing less traffic on our roads than we had in the past of existing traffic, and we won't have the growth. So when we say we're going to need those properties, we may not even need them for 20 years right now. So we're saying we need to take a 3-year approach instead of a 20-year approach, because those 3-year approaches seem like they're going to be 5 to 7 now. And actually may change entirely with the new atmosphere we have and economic times.
Commissioner Slurry?
I think one of the reasons why this will start getting bogged down here today is because we're trying to do two things in one item. One is we're trying to prioritize the roads that we want built, and the other is we're trying to work on or maybe change Resolution 139. I'd like to suggest that for today, we ask staff to go ahead and again take a look at prioritizing the roads, and this may be the list they come up with, but based on connectivity and price and other things that the commissioners may have said is important, or the MPO said is important, and then come back and show us this list with recommendations on how we then implement this list in such a way that it's basically consistent with the spirit of Resolution 139 and doesn't in any way impact the rights of any of our citizens. And then, maybe today or at a later date, go ahead and suggest to the new county attorney that we have problems with this, and just ask him to get together with Mr. Moore, Mr. Zito, Mr. Jason, and start the process of seeing if any of 139 needs to be changed. But for today, I'd feel more comfortable just, I mean, we understand, this board understands that, and the staff obviously does because they brought it to our attention, that we're going to run out of money before we actually build any roads based on the way we're going. And I'd like to stop that process or slow that process down and ensure that in the next 3 years we actually do build some roads. And I'm with Commissioner Wheeler. For me, I'd have a priority on building roads which add connectivity and which can be done in a cost-effective manner, meaning that if we only have 1 or 2 pieces of land to purchase before we get to build that road, that would have a higher priority for me. So that's a suggested path forward.
You know, in today's environment, I would agree. Whenever it was crazy, I still think it's extremely important to purchase the right-of-way in advance, as fast as it can be, because the developers' agreements that we were able to put in place actually put the burden of the road on the developer. One thing the developer couldn't do, they could build a road, but they had to have the land to build the road on, and therefore the right-of-way was holding that up. So, 4 years ago, I would have disagreed with you. Today, I think that you're probably more in line with.
And just how I see it, I think there are 2 issues, and one is, I think Commissioner Wheeler said, we did get too ambitious. We got a little over-ambitious with some of these road projects going to 60%. We bit off way more than we could chew and handle, and then the declining revenue made it worse. But I don't think 139 is all that broken. To me, it's just a matter of the timing of, and particularly the point number 4, when that triggers the beginning of these time period certains. It's when do we invoke item 4? And as an example, just last week at the MPO, we saw a 2035 long-range transportation plan from the consultant, and assuming we adopt that, somewhere in the future, we're going to have to 4-lane Old Dixie Highway, we're going to 2-lane 82nd Avenue, and a lot of these other roads that will impact commercial, they impact residential. But I don't think that means if we adopt that 2035 plan, we should be forced to have to start going out and buying right-of-way. And so to me, it becomes when do we trigger that timeline where we have to invoke the 120-day. And I like the concept that knowing, and maybe 139 can just be changed once it's at 60% design and fully funded within the first 3 years of the capital improvement plan. Then we start triggering the 120-day timeline because we have full funding for it. We're focused on those phases. We know we can get done. It doesn't change, I think you're concerned, Commissioner Davis, because it still would allow a property owner on a different portion of the road to voluntarily come in and resolve their issue. It's just that we don't trigger that 120-day timeline and lawyers and stuff until we're at 60% and fully funded within the first 3 years of the CIP. I think, and then that would still put all those people, they would still have the property rights, 120 days, the notice, all that, but it's just when we trigger that. So I think making sure we can fund it is the key thing going forward, and phasing our projects a little better, taking off smaller bites. But I do think that the 7 roads are doable. I think they are critical because they do open up a lot of different avenues and interconnectivity. 53rd Street from 58th Avenue to US 1. Not only would that allow a lot of traffic to bypass 60, but I believe there's a lot of commercial that'll go in on 53rd once that road's opened up, so it's going to trigger activity. 26th Street we've won for a long time, both the Aviation Boulevard segment as well as a parallel route for State Road 60 to take traffic off of that. And the 43rd Avenue intersection and the Oslo project, I think, will take a lot of traffic off 27th and 43rd in the lower southern part of the county and maybe pull those projects off the board completely. So I think these projects do a lot for us. I think staff says about $66 million, and looking at the information Jason provided us after the break, we have about $107 million that we are fairly realistic we think we can fund. So, I think going forward with this recommendation is appropriate, and then, we can always, I think, amend 139 again once the new attorney is on board. But I think at some point we need to give staff some direction and move forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler, then Commissioner Fleischer.
Yeah, over these roads in the last several years, I've had a lot of conversations, so I don't know if it was discussed here or in private meetings, but I think it was at the dais, and, at one time, the people that are in limbo and don't want to be in limbo, they can call, I want to sell my property, and we talked about closing that out as quickly as possible, reaching an agreement, and so the people that don't want to sell, they can sit there and wait until we have to take their property and we're ready to build the road. And we talked about, I think we talked about that at the commission meeting. The other thing, and when we get into the 7 roads here, the one thing that I would ask for clarity on so I'd understand it better, they've got from 26th Street between 82nd and 74th paved that. That's a good thing. I think we were tying with Indian River States on that.
And they were supposed to pave it, I thought.
Yeah. And then, a portion of it.
Right.
And we were and that's a good thing because it's a parallel to 60. Then you've got 26th Street from 43rd to US 1. Right. And I'd like to know how those would tie in, because one of the problems, and again, it's a serious right-of-way problem, is 26th Street between 43rd and 58th, which not only is a 2-lane, it's a dangerous, narrow 2-lane with telephone poles probably within 1.5 feet of the pavement. And, and so we're increasing traffic and flow on that road with a real bottleneck in between. And I just like to know and be comfortable with the fact that if we're doing that, we're not going to make that bottleneck more dangerous, I guess, by having more traffic on there. Because I drive that every day, and it's even hard to stay on the pavement at times. And, but anyway, that's where I'm at. I think that still, if people want to sell the right of way along these roads and they come and say, hey, I'm ready to move, I want to sell my property, I think we can still work on that. But to go through all the legal and the expense and everything else to try and accumulate everything before we're closer to building it, I'd still rather have my money in the ground.
And just to that point, 139 at 30% does allow us to do that.
Yes.
So if we've got something, and that's probably, Chris, is that, that's year 4 and 5 or 6 if we're getting to 30%.
But it kind of requires us, I think, to move ahead at a certain point.
Not at 30%. At 30%.
No, not, but it's 60%.
It's willing property owners. And then at 60%, and within the first 3 years is when we're required to. But I think at 30%, if a homeowner wants to come in and say, yep, I want to settle and get out, then we can certainly do that. But I think it's this forced acquisition is where the trigger is. But Commissioner Fleischer.
Then I'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree on Resolution 139. I believe that it does a lot. It represents a few years of concern and work, and greatly assists the county in getting a project done, but more importantly, there's a lot of safeguards for the citizens. I'd like to see staff review the 7 roadways, and if the 7 projects, if it's 10 projects, listing all the concerns that were reviewed today, review them. It might take a little time to get that done, and by that time, we should have our new attorney operating, and I believe that's the best foot forward. I believe we've heard a consensus on that. Joe?
Yes, I've heard 2 things. One, I think that the commissioners thinks that those are priorities, and I think if you, like Commissioner Solari said very well, that there's 2 things going on here. I think if we voted to make those a priorities and then come back with the other information as well as that on the new resolution, and when we get the attorney, I think that would, I think that helps, because we would like to make these our priorities because we're so close and get some roads done. I mean, I think they'll help a lot.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. I agree, especially item number 1 there. I mean, that one is exciting to be able to have some connectivity.
And, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that at this point we ask the staff to prioritize these 7 items, and that we go ahead consistently as we can with Resolution 139. And if there's anything that they feel that but if there's anything that they need to do that's somehow maybe inconsistent with the spirit of 139, come back to us. And I'd also like to have them report back to us, say in about 3 months, with a progress report on these specifically prioritized roads, but with more detail on the expected cost of them all to complete the roads, so that we can have a better idea of where we'll be going forward. I mean, we've seen that this has been a very fluid process over the last few years, and things change rapidly, and I'd like us to be on top of any future changes. But that's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
And just to summarize, it's to proceed with prioritizing the 7 road projects as presented in backup. Any other interpretation of 2008-139 should come to the board for approval, and a 3-month progress report on the prioritized projects.
Thank you.
Okay. There's a motion.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Wheeler. Discussion?
Yes, just so I have it clear in my mind, we are not changing anything with the resolution.
We don't know yet. I mean, if the idea is to go through, in this motion, we're not.
Okay.
And if the staff finds out that there's in order to get these prioritized roads done, that they have to do anything inconsistent with 139, that they'll come back before us.
Okay. And, Mr. Chairman, while we're on that same line, I just want to, the people that are out here that have the concerns about this resolution are not those that were able to reach an agreement with the county. They were individuals that actually had problems with the county and their negotiations.
I think Mr. Stanbridge we've already put the money in court.
Stipulation.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is they were the ones that were saying, please give us the protection of your court system. So the far as what you had mentioned earlier, it wasn't the problem of individuals having the opportunity to voluntarily work on negotiation with the county with this resolution. It was those that said, county, please take us to court to where we can get under a jurisdiction that we trust. Right or wrong, that was their feelings. Secondly, point that I'd like to make before we move, and I'm going to support your motion, by the way. But secondly is, we created this ordinance at a time when we had an extreme in the real estate bubble, and it was coming on the downhill side of it. Now I think we're at another extreme. And I think to have some temperament in here, like you're talking about doing, if we have to reevaluate perhaps, but I don't want to get back to the same situation that we were in 2004, where we only spent $900,000 in the middle at the start of a boom on right-of-way. And so to keep in mind that I don't want to create a policy in today's environment to lead us into the future, because I don't think that would be smart. This is not going to stay this way forever, I hope.
That's the reason for my 3-month review.
Okay.
May I have a clarification? I'm not sure I understood you, Commissioner Davis. And I'm only here because of the people throughout the county who need to know that they have rights. And the reason you have the 170 or how many you had was because before that time, the county did not give them the rights. They went out, talked to them. It came back 6 months later, a year later, whatever. These folks never knew that they had an opportunity to get their own attorney. And we've said before, when that notice to owner went out to them, they could use it for scratch paper, but at least they had their rights, and they knew if they read it that they had an opportunity to either come to the county and deal with them. They could come to the county and deal with them and then get their attorney, whatever they wanted to do, but their rights were there. And that's the only reason that River Stanbridge is here, because I want that right for everybody in this county. And that's why I don't want to see 139 messed with until all the people can come, not in a departmental matter, but through a workshop, public hearing, some way it can be discussed. I think the people on 66th Avenue was in the transition before the way you did it the old way. You know, you just visit people, and the way you're supposed to do it from a professional manner and give people their rights. And unfortunately, our entire road, 6.5 miles, got caught up in the old system, and the new system came in. Hopefully, the new system is here to stay. So, and that's why those folks are, you know, we have a road that was on the plans, it was ready to go. We didn't have a public hearing because it was ready to go. And here it is 4 years later, and it may not be ready to go, but those people are still stuck out there. So, Commissioner Davis, you understood that this...
I understood that the ordinance is not changing, the resolution is not changing today.
Okay.
That's what I understand, that because I clarified that.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Pelton.
Excuse me. Again, on clarity, I think as far as the prioritization of these 7 projects and other roads, I think, as Mr. Solari said in what I thought was his first motion, which I thought was excellent, I think we need a little more input on that, because there's several questions. Chris brought up a subject like acquiring right-of-way for stormwater and drainage, which, you know, would be maybe a priority even before we went forward with construction. I think there's a lot of input that we need to put into this before we just assume where we're going.
Well, I think those roads that we've picked only need a small parcel, so they're ready to move. That's why they are, number one, they're needed and they're ready, very close to being ready. There'll be other ones as we move forward that we'll update, and, you know, if a piece comes available, we'll bring it to the board and update and make everyone aware of it. I think that's a given.
So what basic changes are we making today that we didn't have this morning? Is there any?
Not that I'm aware of.
The direction I hear from there was one motion to accept those as part of those projects and build them in. The second thing that I'm seeing is direction on a separate motion I think that the board's going to make, and this is that we come back when we have the new attorney if we're going to come back with an amendment to that resolution, come back with the new attorney reviewing it, and also make sure we incorporate the safeguards that Mrs. Stanbridge said were in 132.
Okay, so again, we're not saying that we're going to buy right away out of sight, you know, just full forge ahead, but we're not saying we're going to stop buying right away either. We're saying we're going to go forward with the motion, incorporating 139 until the new attorney comes into office, and if we have to make any major changes to 139, then we'll have a workshop before we do it. Is that safe?
As I understand my motion, if anybody who has a property that's on one of the projects we've already hit the 60% comes forward voluntarily and wants the county to purchase that property, we'll engage them and work towards the purchase. If anybody's in the middle of a piece of property, a purchase by the county that's not included in these 7 properties, and they say we want to continue, we'll continue with the purchase. Okay. What this basically does is, understanding that the staff can only work on, really seriously work on so many projects at one time, it directs staff to work on these 7 projects. It also realizes that this whole process has been fluid over the last years, will continue to be fluid, and we're going to have a review in 3 months to see if there are any changes. I'm hoping that that review will show us that we've made significant progress with 3-4 of these roads that we're actually imminently going to be building, and that they'll also have some idea on what the cost of completing these roads would be.
Okay, and that's great. And only one parting thought. When things come back better, we all hope someday, whether it's in 5, 6, 7, 8 years or whatever it is, or 2 years or next year. One thing that you can rest assured, with developers agreements and going ahead with developers wanting to get projects approved, you're going to be able to enter in developers agreements, and the developer can go ahead and figure into his profit, figure into cost, figure into whatever it is to build roads. The only thing you can't do is do right-of-way. So if we lean one side or the other and we happen to have right-of-way, but we don't have the road built, when that project's approved, then part of that approval should be that that road's improved before the project goes forward. So I think we have some options with developers agreements in the future.
Mr. Johnson.
Bob Johnson, Carlwyn Subdivision. Is the list we saw, is that the priority of the projects?
Those 7, yes, sir.
In that order?
Is that a yes?
No, it's not a...
I don't think they're in
That was the 7 projects. They weren't in any priority, were they?
No, they're not in any particular order of priority.
Okay. The approval of these 7 projects, does that trigger a bond issue?
No, sir.
Thank you.
We do not anticipate it does at this time.
Mr. Zito.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's just a priority list. You'll see in the next agenda item a perfect example of a voluntary acquisition where a homeowner was anxious about their future going forward, wanted to do some family planning, and came forward and has made a recommended purchase and sale for your consideration today. So that's a perfect example of working within the spirit of the resolution, as Commissioner Solari mentioned. Secondly, as just a point of a statistical note, it appears from what we've heard through the attorney's office today, out of the 170 that were compelled to be transferred for eminent domain proceedings, 155 of them have elected not to go forward in that regard. So that will give you some indication of the pulse of the homeowners out there.
Okay. Good. We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry. I'll try to summarize. It's to prioritize the 7 items that's listed in the backup. Any inconsistencies with 2008-139 will come back to the board for approval, and a 3-month progress report as a follow-up. Is that summary accurate? Okay. And that was a second by Commissioner Wheeler. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to Public Works, item 2, 43rd Avenue Stormwater Retention Area, right-of-way, Margaret B. Derwin, 585 43rd Avenue, Vero Beach, Florida. Memorandum dated January 11, 2010.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a right-of-way purchase from a Margaret Derwin, who lives in the 500 block of 43rd Avenue. It is an advance right-of-way purchase for a pond site that will be needed when 43rd Avenue is 4-laned between Oslo Road and 12th Street. That project is basically sets up 7 stormwater retention basins that will empty stormwater and direct stormwater into 4 pond sites. This is the last of those 4 pond sites that we need. Mrs. Derwin has an 8.33 acre parcel zoned RS3. This will acquire 1.76 acres of that property to be used for a pond site. Mrs. Derwin has been negotiating with the county, and she's a willing seller. She's agreed to do 2 things, basically, to sell the county the 1.76 acres and also to grant us a 10-foot temporary construction easement along 43rd Avenue for the price of $200,000. There are no attorney's fees or appraisal fees included in that amount, and staff recommends that the board approve the purchase and sale agreement in the amount of $200,000 to Mrs. Derwin.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer and a second from Commissioner Davis for staff recommendation. Discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Item 3, staff update, Sector 3 beach renourishment project. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is the beach restoration Sector 3 project weekly update for the board. Where we are with the project, and just to remind you, this is a just under 500,000 cubic yards of sand project for the north 6.5 miles of beach between roughly between Treasure Shores Park and the town of Indian River Shores. Where we are with the project is we have now received our notice of intent to issue a permit from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. That was delivered to the coastal engineering staff on January 15th. We do not have our draft permit yet, but we expect to have that by tomorrow. As is required under the permit conditions, we're required, once we receive the draft permit, to advertise for public comments for a 14-day period. That's now set up to be advertised in the Vero Beach Press Journal from January 22nd through February 5th. Other developments, DEP has gone ahead and recorded the erosion control line. That's the line that runs parallel to the beach and separates private property from state property. That's now been recorded. They'll be transmitting that to us this week. We've gone in anticipation of getting our final permit and beginning construction. We've gone ahead and set up a February 8th pre-construction meeting with Ranger Construction, the project contractor, also Coastal Tech, our design engineer, and staff from the regulatory agencies such as DEP and Fish and Wildlife. We're going to have that on the February 8th, which will fit in nicely because if we can get we can end the comment period on February 5th, get our draft permit, we should be able to have the pre-construction meeting, which is a requirement in order to receive a notice to proceed. We can get the notice to proceed the next day after the pre-construction, which will be February 9th. We can schedule Ranger to go ahead and begin construction and start hauling sand onto the beach on that same day, February 9th. That will give us enough time to complete the project prior to turtle season, May 1st. In other developments, we've been evaluating, coastal staff along with Coastal Tech has been evaluating the contract and change order proposed by Ranger Construction. Because of the project being split into two phases, one part being built this year and the north part by Archie Carr being built next year, it causes the contract amount to increase by an amount proposed by Ranger in the amount of $984,000. That would change Ranger's contract amount from $7.27 million to about $8.26 million. Staff and Coastal Tech have been looking at that, and we're going to be bringing the contract award and the change order for the board's consideration the first meeting in February, which would be the second. We've also been looking at a work order number 8 to our contract with Coastal Tech, our design consultant, for construction phase 1 services and post-construction phase 1 monitoring for Sector 3. Staff will be bringing that cost proposal to the board also on February 2nd, at the same time we bring the Ranger contract and change order. If everything falls into place, we do the 14-day comment period, we get our final permit, we get the notice to proceed, we should be ready to start construction on February 9th. That'll still, like I mentioned, it'll give us enough time to finish phase 1 of the project prior to May 1st.
Thank you. Any questions of Chris? Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, if I'm not mistaken, the original time frame for us that we were anticipating getting the permit back when we started this process, was that January 31st?
Yes, we had anticipated being able to start construction on February 1st, so we're about 8 days behind that timetable, but we've still got enough days in that 3-month period to spread the sand and get
Which
it all
is,
on.
in my opinion, commendable for what bureaucracy you had to wade through. It was an aggressive schedule, and that's just about as close on time as you can get.
Commissioner Slurry.
Chris, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm going to have somewhat of a problem probably with $1 million increase in the cost. So I would certainly like from you and Coastal Tech real clarity on why that $1 million increase would be necessary, including the best financial picture you can bring it forward at that time. I can understand why some increase might be necessary, but I can't, so far, without a lot more detail from you, getting through my head why it might be $1 million.
Right. We've had Ranger break down the costs and the change order associated with additional mobilization, demobilization, additional sand processing. We've had them break it down as much as they can to try and justify the additional costs, and we'll be presenting that to the board on the 2nd. We are not still convinced that $984,000 is all justified, and we haven't really received enough justification from Coastal Tech to warrant it. But we're about halfway there, and we certainly would like Ranger to explain the change order on the 2nd to show exactly why all of this additional money is needed. But that's where we stand right now, and we'll be bringing the full package together on the 2nd.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions to staff? Bob, do you want to say anything at this time, or? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just let you know that heard that the no Jake break signs have been ordered. And so, just as an aside, as far as those going up when the project starts, they have been ordered, and they'll be up on 69th Street at 66th Avenue and 69th Street on 82nd Avenue.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. There's no departmental matters, no county attorney matters, no commission items. That takes us to special districts. Emergency Services District, approval of fiscal year 09-10 EMS County Awards Grant. Purchase of capital operating equipment using non-matching EMS grant funds and grant resolution. Memorandum dated December 21st, 2009.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Let the record show the motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Wheeler absent. And that is it. Is there anything further to discuss, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank these fine individuals for securing those grants and getting the equipment in the hands of the men and women who serve, and getting a better value for the citizens. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, very good. Seeing no more business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.